The rope was already being measured when Clara Linwood stepped off that train. Not for hanging, not yet. But in Red Hollow, judgment came faster than justice, and a woman like her, fat, desperate, alone? She was guilty before she ever opened her mouth. They laughed, they whispered, they decided who she was in seconds, but one man didn't join them. And that single act of decency would tear this town apart. This is the story of how truth became a weapon, how love became a battleground, and how the woman they underestimated became the one thing they couldn't destroy. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The train's brakes screamed like something dying. Clara felt it in her chest, metal grinding against metal, the whole car shuddering as Red Hollow's excuse for a station came into view. Through the dust-smeared window, she could see them already gathering. A dozen faces, maybe more, waiting. Her hands twisted in her lap, wringing the fabric of her gray traveling dress until her knuckles went white. "You getting off here, miss?" The conductor stood in the aisle, hat in hand, trying for polite but not quite hiding the curiosity in his eyes. He'd been stealing glances at her the whole ride from Omaha, at her size, at the worn state of her luggage, at the way she sat alone while other passengers clustered in chattering groups. "Yes." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Yes, I am." "Well." He shifted his weight. "Good luck to you." The way he said it made her stomach drop. The train jerked to a full stop. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the platform. She could see their mouths moving, heads turning, fingers pointing. The September sun beat down on them all, turning the whole scene into something shimmering and unreal. Clara stood. Her legs felt like water. She'd practiced this moment 100 times in her head during the 3-day journey. Practiced stepping off that train with her chin up, her shoulders back, looking like a woman who belonged somewhere, looking like someone worth marrying. But now, actually doing it? Her reflection caught in the window glass as she moved toward the door. Round face, double chin, arms that strained against her sleeves, hair that never did what it was told, even pinned tight under her bonnet. 24 years old and already carrying the weight of a lifetime of being looked at the wrong way. The conductor opened the door. Heat slammed into her like a fist, dry, choking, tasting of alkali and horse dung and something burning. The crowd's chatter died the instant she appeared in the doorway. Silence hit harder than any insult ever had. She gripped the handrail and descended. 1 step, 2, 3. Her boot heels clicked against the wooden platform, loud as gunshots in that terrible quiet. Then someone laughed. It started low, just a snicker from somewhere in the back of the crowd. But it spread. A woman's high giggle, a man's guffaw. Within seconds, the whole platform was alive with it. Jesus Christ, look at the size of her. That's what he ordered? That? Must be desperate, taking a pig like that. The voices crashed over her in waves. Clara's vision blurred at the edges. Her chest felt too tight, ribs squeezing her lungs until each breath came shallow and quick. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry." She forced herself to look up. The crowd had formed a rough semicircle around the platform's edge. Men in dusty work clothes and women in faded calico, their faces ranging from openly mocking to merely curious. A few children had pushed to the front, staring with the brutal honesty of the young. "Where's the groom?" someone called out. "Boone, you seeing this?" More laughter. More. Clara's eyes swept the crowd, searching for him. For Ezekiel Boone, the man whose letters had been her lifeline these past 4 months. The man who'd written, "I need a wife who can work, who won't break. The frontier doesn't care what you look like, only what you're made of." She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed every word. But now, standing here while this town laughed at her like she was a traveling show's sad attraction, doubt sank its teeth in deep. What if the letters had been a lie? What if some cruel bastard had invented the whole thing as a joke? What if... Enough! The word cut through the noise like a blade. The laughter didn't stop immediately. It sputtered and died in awkward patches as the crowd turned, looking toward the far end of the platform. A man stepped forward, tall, lean in a way that spoke of hard work rather than hunger. Maybe 35, maybe older, the frontier aged people in ways that defied counting. He wore dusty brown trousers, a collarless shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a hat so weathered it might have been original to the territory. His face was all hard angles and sun-dark skin, clean-shaven except for a few days' stubble. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark. Steady. Looking right at her, not at her body, not at the parts of her that inspired whispers and giggles. At her. He moved through the crowd like Moses through water. People stepped aside. The laughter had died completely now, replaced by something else. Not respect exactly. More like wariness. He stopped 3 feet from where she stood, close enough that she could see the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the calluses on his hands, the dust coating his boots. Clara Linwood? His voice matched his face, rough, spare, offering nothing extra. Yes. She managed to get the word out without her voice breaking. Mr. Boone? He nodded once. Then he did something she didn't expect. He removed his hat. It was old-fashioned, that gesture. The kind of thing her father used to do when meeting a lady. The kind of respect she hadn't been shown in longer than she could remember. Sorry about the welcome. He spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. Red Hollow's got some people in it who forgot what manners look like. A few uncomfortable shuffles from the onlookers. Someone coughed. Ezekiel turned, scanning the faces around them. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warning. We done here? Or do some of you need more to stare at? The crowd began to disperse. Slowly at first, then faster, as Ezekiel's gaze landed on specific individuals. Within a minute, the platform had mostly cleared, people drifting back toward the dusty main street with its crooked buildings and false front stores. But not everyone left. A man emerged from the shadows of the station house. Younger than Ezekiel, maybe 28, 30 at most. Where Ezekiel was rough-cut and weathered, this man looked polished. Pressed trousers, clean white shirt, vest buttoned neat despite the heat. His hair was the same dark brown as Ezekiel's, but slicked back with pomade. His smile showed teeth. Brother, the word dripped something that wasn't quite affection. You didn't mention your bride was arriving today. Ezekiel's jaw tightened. Didn't know it was your business, Victor. Victor. Clara remembered that name from the letters. Ezekiel's younger brother. The one who'd gone east for schooling, came back with big ideas about modernizing the ranch. The one Ezekiel had described as ambitious in ways that make me nervous. Victor's eyes slid to Clara, up and down, taking inventory. She felt it like hands on her skin, assessing, calculating, finding her wanting. Miss Linwood. He swept his hat off with a flourish that made Ezekiel's simple gesture look crude. Victor Hale Boone, a pleasure. He extended his hand. Clara hesitated, then took it. His palm was soft. No calluses. The handshake lasted a beat too long. Quite the journey you must have had, Victor continued, still holding her hand. All the way from Philadelphia. Her voice came out steadier this time. Philadelphia, my word! And here I thought Ezekiel's advertisements reached only as far as Chicago. His smile widened. He must have cast quite the wide net to land such an unexpected catch. The insult was there, wrapped in courtesy. Clara pulled her hand free. Ezekiel stepped between them. We're leaving. Of course, of course. Victor backed up, hands raised in mock surrender. I'm sure you two have much to discuss. The ranch, the arrangements, He paused, smile turning sharp. Well, all of it. He replaced his hat and tipped it to Clara. Welcome to Red Hollow, Miss Linwood. I'm certain you'll find it educational. Then he was gone, striding toward a buggy hitched near the station, leaving just the two of them on the platform. Clara and Ezekiel stood in awkward silence. Up close, she could see more details. The way his shirt was clean but patched at the shoulder. The depth of the lines around his eyes, sun damage or worry or both. A small nick on his jaw where he'd cut himself shaving. Your trunk. He gestured toward the baggage car. Just the one. The brown leather. He nodded and moved to retrieve it. She watched him lift it, not struggling exactly, but this was no light load. Everything she owned fit in that trunk. 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, the letters from Ezekiel tied with string. Not much to show for 24 years. He carried it toward a wagon hitched at the platform's far end. Plain buckboard, 2 horses. Working animals, not show ponies. Can you manage the step? He nodded toward the wagon. Yes. She climbed up. The wagon groaned under her weight. She saw Ezekiel glance at the axle, saw him notice. Her face burned. He climbed up beside her, took the reins. The wagon shifted again, but held. They pulled away from the station. Red Hollow spread out around them, if you could call it spreading. One main street of packed dirt, rutted from wagon wheels and stained dark where horses had done their business. Buildings lined either side, most of them raw lumber already turning gray from the sun. A saloon with a painted sign. A general store. A building that might have been a church but looked like it served double duty as a meeting hall. People watched from doorways and windows as they passed. Clara kept her eyes forward, but she could feel the stares, hear the whispers starting up again now that Ezekiel wasn't there to silence them. "Takes about an hour to reach the ranch." Ezekiel spoke without looking at her. "Road's rough." "I understand." "You eaten?" "On the train, some. We'll get proper food in you when we arrive. Sarah, she's the woman who helps with cooking. She'll have something ready." Sarah, another name from the letters. The widow who lived in a cabin on the property's edge earned her keep by handling the kitchen and the chickens. They left the town behind. The landscape opened up, rolling hills covered in yellowing grass, broken by dark stands of pine and ragged outcrops of red rock. The sky stretched endless overhead, so blue it hurt to look at. About what happened back there, Ezekiel's voice was careful. At the station, Clara's stomach clenched. Here it came. The apology. The explanation that he'd expected someone different, someone smaller, someone who wouldn't make the wagon groan and the whole town laugh. "I won't tolerate it," he continued. "People running their mouths about my wife." "My wife." The words hit strange. They weren't married yet. She'd assumed there'd be a ceremony, a preacher, something to make it legal. But the way he said it, "We're not," she started. "Will be, soon as we get you settled. Judge comes through next week." He glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. "Unless you've changed your mind, you're within your rights." "Have you?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Changed your mind, I mean." "No." Simple, definite, like everything else about him. They rode in silence for a while. The wagon wheels clattered over rocks. Somewhere, a hawk screamed. Clara's hands twisted in her lap again. There were things she should say. "Thank you for the letters. Thank you for standing up for me. Thank you for not laughing." But the words stuck in her throat. "I know what they think." Her voice came out small. "What they see when they look at me. Don't matter what they see. It matters to them. They're not the ones you'll be living with." He pulled the wagon to a stop. They were in the middle of nowhere, just grass and sky and the faint outline of mountains to the west. Ezekiel turned to face her properly for the first time. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it." His dark eyes held hers. "I didn't write those letters looking for Pretty. Pretty doesn't feed cattle or mend fence or survive a winter that'll freeze you dead if you're not careful. I wrote looking for someone strong enough to build a life out here. You answered. You came. That took more courage than most people in that town will ever have." Clara's throat tightened. "So no," he continued, "I haven't changed my mind. Question is whether you have. Because once we're married, you're stuck with me, with the ranch, with all of this." He gestured at the vast emptiness around them. "It's not easy. It's not romantic. Most days it's just hard work and going to bed too tired to think." "I'm not afraid of hard work." "I know. Your letters told me that much." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face, then vanished. But knowing something and living it are different things. He released the brake and the wagon started forward again. "We'll try it," he said. "See how it goes. You don't like it, I'll put you on the train back east. No questions, no shame." "I don't want to go back." The words came out harder than she'd intended, sharper. But they were true. Ezekiel nodded like he understood. Like maybe he'd said the same thing himself once, about somewhere else. They crested a hill, and the ranch came into view. It wasn't much. A house, one story, wood frame, porch sagging slightly on the left side. A barn that had seen better days but still stood square. A few outbuildings scattered around. Corrals holding maybe 24 cattle. Chickens scratching in the dirt near what must be Sarah's cabin. But it was real, solid, a place carved out of nothing through sheer stubbornness. Home, Ezekiel said simply. Clara looked at it, this rough, weathered collection of buildings that represented the rest of her life, and felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope. Not yet. But maybe the space where hope could grow. The wagon rolled down the hill toward the ranch. As they got closer, Clara could see more details. Laundry hanging on a line, a vegetable garden, mostly finished for the season but still showing rows of something green. A dog emerged from the barn, some kind of shepherd mix, gray and white, and started barking. That's Brutus. Ezekiel pulled the wagon to a stop near the house. Useless as a guard dog, but he'll keep you company. The door to Sarah's cabin opened and a woman emerged. 50, maybe older, built like a fence post. Gray hair pulled back severe, apron stained from work. So you did bring her. Sarah's voice carried clear across the yard. Sarah. Ezekiel climbed down, then offered Clara his hand. She took it. His palm was rough with calluses. He held her steady as she stepped down, not letting go until her boots were solid on the ground. Sarah approached, looking Clara up and down with the same assessing gaze as everyone else. But there was something different in her eyes. Not mockery, just evaluation. You cook? Yes, ma'am. So? Yes, ma'am. Ride? Clara hesitated. I've been on a horse. Once. She'll learn. Ezekiel lifted Clara's trunk from the wagon bed. Get her settled. I've got fences to check before dark. He carried the trunk toward the house without waiting for a response. Sarah watched him go, then turned back to Clara. You eaten? Not really. Come on, then. The older woman started toward the cabin. Clara followed, Brutus falling into step beside her, tail wagging. Inside, Sarah's cabin was small but clean. A stove in the corner, a rough table, shelves holding supplies. The smell of something cooking, beans maybe, and salt pork. Sit. Sarah pointed to the table. Clara sat. Sarah ladled stew into a bowl, set it in front of her with a chunk of bread. Eat. The food was simple, but good. Clara realized she was starving. She'd barely touched the dried beef and crackers she'd bought at a station in Kansas, too nervous to eat. Sarah poured coffee, strong, bitter, perfect, and sat across from her. So, the older woman's eyes were sharp. Philadelphia. Yes, ma'am. Long way. Yes, ma'am. And you came all this way to marry a man you've never met. Clara swallowed a mouthful of stew. The letters. Letters are words on paper. They're not living with a man, working beside him, sharing a bed. Heat flooded Clara's face. Sarah's expression didn't change. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to see if you know what you've gotten into. I know it won't be easy. Easy. Sarah laughed, a short, sharp bark. Girl, there's nothing easy about this life. Winter'll freeze you. Summer'll bake you. The work never ends, and the land doesn't care if you're tired or sick or heartbroken. It'll take everything you've got and ask for more. Then why stay? Because it's mine. Sarah leaned back. My husband and I came here 20 years ago, built our place with our own hands. He died 8 years back, horse threw him, broke his neck. But this land's still mine. I work for Ezekiel now because it keeps me going, keeps me useful. But the choice is mine. She fixed Clara with a look that could nail boards. You need to know that, Sarah continued. Whatever happens here, however hard it gets, you've got choice. Ezekiel's a good man, better than most, but he's not a savior. He's just a man trying to keep his head above water, same as the rest of us. I'm not looking for a savior. Then what are you looking for? The question hung there. Clara set down her spoon. A place, she said finally, where I can be something other than what everyone decided I was. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right then. She stood. Finish eating. I'll show you the house. They crossed the yard as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The house was bigger up close than it had looked from the hill. 2 rooms, maybe 3. Ezekiel was nowhere in sight. Sarah pushed open the door. Inside was dark and cool. Plain furniture, table, chairs, a settee that had seen better days. A fireplace taking up most of one wall. Everything clean but worn, cared for, but clearly showing years of use. Main room, Sarah said. Kitchen's through there. She pointed to a doorway. Bedroom's back there. Ezekiel's been sleeping in the barn since he knew you were coming, trying to be proper about it. Clara's chest tightened. He didn't have to. Yes, he did. Man's got his pride. Sarah moved toward the kitchen. I'll show you where things are. Come morning, you'll be handling breakfast. Ezekiel eats early, before dawn usually. He'll expect food that'll hold him till noon. They spent the next hour going through the house, where the flour was kept, how the stove worked, which pans to use for what. Clara tried to absorb it all, but exhaustion was creeping in around the edges. 3 days on a train, the humiliation at the station, the strangeness of everything, it was catching up. You're dead on your feet. Sarah's voice had softened slightly. Get some rest. Tomorrow starts early. Thank you for the food, for... Clara gestured vaguely. Don't thank me yet? But Sarah's expression wasn't unkind. See how you feel after a week. The older woman left, closing the door behind her. Clara stood alone in the house that was supposed to become her home. The silence pressed in. Outside, she could hear chickens settling for the night, the distant lowing of cattle, Brutus barking at something. She moved to the bedroom Sarah had indicated. Simple space, bed frame with a rope mattress, quilts folded at the foot, a dresser with 3 drawers, a mirror on the wall, small, slightly warped, a window looking out toward the mountains. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed. Clara knelt and opened it. Her hands found the bundle of letters first. She pulled them out, untied the string, spread them across the quilt. 12 letters total. The first one stiff and formal, like he was writing a business contract. But they'd gotten warmer as the months went on. Not flowery. Ezekiel didn't seem capable of flowery, but real. Honest. I'm not a man who makes promises easy, he'd written in the 5th letter. But I promise you this. Work hard beside me. Be honest with me. And I'll never give you cause to regret coming here. She'd held on to that promise through everything. Through her sister's disgust that Clara would stoop to answering a mail-order bride advertisement. Through the long train ride with passengers who whispered and pointed. Through the nightmare at the station. Now here she was. Clara stood and looked at herself in the warped mirror. The same round face looked back. The same thick waist, heavy arms, double chin. All the parts of her that had made her unmarriageable back east. That had made her father sigh, and her mother pray, and her sister's friends giggle behind their hands. But Ezekiel had looked at her and seen what? Not beauty. He wasn't a liar, but something else. Something worth defending. She started to undress. Her traveling clothes were dusty and sweat-stained. She folded them carefully. They'd need washing, but there'd be time for that tomorrow, and pulled on her nightgown. The bed was harder than what she was used to, the quilts rougher. But it was clean, and it was hers. And for the first time in days, she felt safe enough to let her guard down. Sleep came fast. She dreamed of Philadelphia, of her father's house with its narrow rooms and narrower views, of her sister's wedding 3 years ago, watching from the back row while everyone pretended not to notice the fat sister who couldn't catch a husband, of the man, Robert fucking Carson, who'd courted her briefly before admitting it was only because he'd lost a bet. The dreams twisted darker, the station platform, faces laughing, Victor's smile with teeth like a trap. Ezekiel walking away, disgusted, leaving her stranded in Red Hollow with nowhere to go, and she woke with a start. Darkness, complete and total. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back. The ranch, Montana territory. Her first night. Something had woken her. She lay still, listening. There, outside. Voices. Low but urgent. Clara slipped from bed and moved to the window. In the moonlight she could see 2 figures by the barn. Ezekiel and someone else. They were arguing. She could tell from their postures even if she couldn't make out the words. The second figure gestured sharply. Moonlight caught something metallic at his waist, a watch chain, vest buttons. Victor. Even from here she could see the tension in Ezekiel's shoulders, the way he stood like a man holding himself back from violence. The argument went on for maybe 5 minutes. Then Victor stalked away toward a horse hitched near the barn. He mounted and rode off toward town. Ezekiel stood alone in the yard for a long time. Then he turned toward the house. Clara stepped back from the window before he could see her watching. She climbed back into bed, heart hammering. What had they been fighting about? The ranch? Money? Her? Sleep didn't come easy after that. When she finally drifted off again, The dreams were full of whispers and shadows, and Victor's calculated smile. Morning came too early. Clara woke to roosters screaming and pale light filtering through the window. Her body ached, from the journey, from the hard bed, from tension she'd been carrying for days. She dressed quickly in one of her work dresses and made her way to the kitchen. The stove was cold, no fire laid. She'd have to start from scratch. It took longer than it should have. The kindling was damp, the chimney drew poorly, but eventually she got flames going. Water on to boil. She found eggs in a basket Sarah must have left the night before, salt pork in the cold box, flour for biscuits. She was pulling the biscuits from the oven when the door opened. Ezekiel stepped in, hat in hand. He looked tired. Dirt on his clothes like he'd been working for hours already. Morning. His eyes went to the food on the table. You didn't have to. You need to eat. He nodded, sat, started eating without ceremony. Clara poured coffee and sat across from him, unsure what to say. The silence stretched awkward. Sleep all right? He asked finally. Yes, thank you. Lie, but a polite one. He nodded, focused on his food. I heard voices, Clara said. Last night, you and someone. Ezekiel's jaw tightened. Victor, is everything... Nothing you need to worry about. He met her eyes. Family, business. The dismissal stung a little, but she let it go. They finished eating in silence. Ezekiel stood, grabbed his hat. I'll be working the south pasture today. Sarah can show you what needs doing around here. She's probably already fed the chickens, but there's laundry and... He paused. You'll figure it out. Then he was gone. Clara sat alone at the table, listening to his boots on the porch, the sound of him calling to Brutus. This was her life now. She stood and started clearing the dishes, trying not to think about how far Philadelphia seemed, how completely she'd severed herself from everything she'd known, how there was no going back. The first week passed in a blur of work that made Clara's previous life seem like a vacation. She woke before dawn, started the stove while her hands were still clumsy with sleep, made breakfast for a man who ate in silence and left before the sun cleared the mountains. Then came the dishes, the laundry, hauling water from the pump until her shoulders screamed, scrubbing against the washboard until her knuckles bled. The chickens, who were mean as snakes and twice as stupid. The garden, what was left of it, mending clothes by lamplight while her eyes burned. Sarah helped, but Sarah also judged. You call that needed? The older woman poked at Clara's bread dough on the third morning. Looks like you gave up halfway through. I needed it for 10 minutes. Then need it for 15. Bread can tell when you're being lazy. Clara bit back a response and kept working the dough until her arms shook. But slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, things started to click. The stove began to make sense, its moods and quirks becoming familiar. The chickens still pecked at her, but she learned to move faster. The garden yielded enough squash and late beans to make a decent stew. Her biscuits stopped coming out like rocks. Ezekiel noticed. This is good, he said on the 8th morning, nodding at the plate of eggs and bacon she'd set before him. 2 words, but they landed like a compliment from a king. Thank you. He looked at her properly then, not a glance, but actual eye contact. You're managing all right? Yes. Sarah's not riding you too hard? She's teaching me. Something that might have been approval crossed his face. That's how she does it, hard at first. Eases up once she sees you're not going to quit. He finished eating and stood. I'm riding out to check the north fence line today. Won't be back till after dark. Clara nodded, already mentally cataloging what needed doing. Then something occurred to her. Can I come with you sometime, when you ride out? Ezekiel paused, hat halfway to his head. You want to? You said I'd need to learn to ride. Seems like I should start. He considered this. Tomorrow. We'll start tomorrow. But I'm warning you, it's not like those fancy riding schools back east. You're going to fall. Probably more than once. I'm not afraid of falling. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. No, I don't suppose you are. After he left, Clara attacked the day's work with renewed energy. There was something to look forward to now. Something beyond scrubbing and cooking and trying not to embarrass herself in front of Sarah. She was hanging laundry when she heard the horse. At first she thought it was Ezekiel coming back for something he'd forgotten. but the hoofbeats were too quick, too showy. She turned and saw Victor riding up the path, sitting his horse like he was posing for a portrait. Claire's hand stilled on the wet sheet. Victor dismounted with unnecessary flourish and looped his reins over the porch rail. He was dressed like he was going to church, pressed trousers, clean white shirt, brocade vest, despite the heat. His smile was all teeth. "Mrs. Boone." He swept his hat off. "Or should I still say Miss Linwood? I confess I'm unclear on whether the vows have been spoken." "Mr. Boone," Clara kept her voice level. "Ezekiel's not here." "I know. I saw him heading north this morning." Victor moved closer. "Actually, I came to see you." Warning bells went off in Clara's head. She glanced toward Sarah's cabin, but the older woman was nowhere in sight. "I'm quite busy, as you can see." Of course. The work of a rancher's wife never ends." He gestured at the laundry. "Though I must say I had hoped my brother would hire help for such tasks. A woman of your obvious qualities shouldn't be reduced to manual labor." The insult was wrapped so prettily she almost missed it. "I don't mind the work." "How gracious of you." Victor leaned against the porch rail, making himself comfortable. "Tell me, how are you finding Red Hollow? I imagine it's quite different from Philadelphia." "It's different." "And the people? Have they been welcoming?" Clara's hands twisted in the wet fabric. She thought of the station platform, the laughter, the whispers that still followed her on the rare occasions she'd gone into town with Sarah. "As welcoming as can be expected." "Ah," Victor's eyes gleamed. "So you've experienced our local hospitality. I'm sorry for that. Small towns can be provincial. They fear what they don't understand. I'm managing fine." "I'm sure you are. Ezekiel mentioned in your letters that you're quite resilient." He paused. "He showed me the letters, you know, before he sent for you. Wanted my opinion on whether he was making a mistake." Claire's breath caught. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that a man gets lonely out here, that sometimes loneliness makes us see what we want to see, rather than what's really there." Victor's smile never wavered. "But he was determined, and my brother, once his mind is set, is unmovable as stone." There was something ugly beneath the polished words. Clara could feel it like a splinter working its way under skin. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Boone?" "Just being neighborly, checking in on my soon-to-be sister-in-law." He pushed off from the rail. "Though I confess I do have a small concern." "What concern?" Victor's expression shifted, still smiling, but with a hint of worry that looked practiced. "It's about Ezekiel. I'm not sure how much he's told you about the ranch's situation." "What situation?" "The financial one." Victor lowered his voice like they were conspirators. "We're not doing well, Clara. May I call you Clara? The ranch is barely breaking even. Last winter was brutal. We lost a quarter of the herd, and Ezekiel, stubborn as he is, refuses to modernize, refuses to consider new methods, new approaches." Claire's mind raced. Ezekiel had never mentioned money troubles in his letters. "If things are so bad," she said slowly, "why did he send for a wife? Pride." Victor said it like it explained everything. He's trying to prove he can make this work, that he can build something lasting, but pride doesn't pay debts, and it doesn't survive droughts. "Then what would you suggest?" "Consolidation. Selling off portions of the land to raise capital, investing in better stock, better equipment. But Ezekiel won't hear it. This land was our father's, you see. He thinks selling any of it would be betrayal." Victor stepped closer. Too close. Clara could smell the pomade in his hair, the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. "I tell you this," he continued, "because you have a right to know what you've walked into. You left everything behind to come here. You deserve the truth, don't you think? If Ezekiel wanted me to know, he'd tell me himself. Would he?" Victor's eyebrows rose. "My brother is many things, Clara, but forthcoming isn't one of them. He keeps things locked up tight, his worries, his fears, his failures. It's not healthy. It's not fair to you." The door to Sarah's cabin banged open. "Victor?" Sarah's voice cut across the yard like a whip crack. "What are you doing here?" "Just visiting, Sarah? Is that a crime?" "It is when Ezekiel's not around and you're bothering his wife." "Bothering? I'm having a conversation. Is conversation forbidden now?" Sarah crossed the yard with surprising speed for a woman her age. She positioned herself between Victor and Clara like a wall. You've said your piece. Now, get on your horse and ride back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Victor's smile finally cracked. Something cold showed through. Careful, old woman. Your position here isn't as secure as you think. Jay old. My position is fine. Yours is the one that's shaky. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Ezekiel knows what you're trying to do. We all do. And what am I trying to do? Undermine him. Make him look weak so you can swoop in and take what's his. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth, and you know it. Sarah turned to Clara. Don't listen to anything this snake says. He's got his own agenda, and it's got nothing to do with helping anyone but himself. Victor's jaw tightened. For a moment, Clara thought he might actually lose his temper. But he reeled it back in, smoothed his features, retrieved his smile from wherever he'd dropped it. I can see I'm not wanted. He placed his hat back on his head with exaggerated care. Clara, it was lovely speaking with you. I do hope you'll consider what I said. He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Sarah watched until he disappeared down the path. Then she turned to Clara. What did he say to you? Clara explained. The questions, the concerns about money, the implication that Ezekiel was hiding things. Sarah's expression darkened. That bastard! Is it true? About the ranch struggling? Every ranch struggles. That's the nature of it. Some years are good, some are bad, but we're not drowning. Ezekiel's careful, conservative. He doesn't take stupid risks. Sarah's eyes bored into Clara. Victor wants you to doubt, wants you scared and uncertain, because scared people make mistakes. Why does he hate Ezekiel so much? Sarah sighed. That's a question with a long answer. Come on, let's get this laundry finished and I'll tell you what you need to know. They worked side by side, hanging sheets and shirts while Sarah talked. Their father died 5 years ago, Sarah began. Left the ranch to Ezekiel. All of it. Victor got nothing. Nothing? Not the ranch anyway. He got money. A decent sum. Enough to start his own operation or invest in business. But he wanted the land. Wanted what Ezekiel got. Sarah pinned a shirt to the line with savage efficiency. He contested the will. Dragged it through every legal channel he could find. Lost every time. The will was clear. Ezekiel got the ranch because Ezekiel worked it. Victor had gone east for school, stayed away for years. Their father knew who earned it. So Victor came back. Oh yes, came back with big plans, wanted to be partners, wanted to help Ezekiel modernize. But his help always seemed to benefit Victor more than anyone else. They fought. Victor moved into town, set himself up as some kind of gentleman rancher without actually having a ranch. Sarah's laugh was bitter. He's been circling ever since, waiting for Ezekiel to fail so he can step in and claim what he thinks is rightfully his. Clara hung the last sheet. And now I'm here. Now you're here. And Victor sees that as either a weakness he can exploit or a threat he needs to eliminate. Haven't figured out which yet. What would you have me do? Sarah looked at her square. Be smart. Don't trust him. And for the love of all that's holy, don't repeat anything he says to you. Victor's a collector. He gathers information like other men gather coins. He'll use whatever you tell him against Ezekiel somehow. Clara nodded slowly. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just a marriage, wasn't just learning to survive on a ranch. She'd walked into the middle of a war. That night, when Ezekiel returned after dark as promised, Clara had supper waiting. Venison stew. Sarah had provided the meat, with the last of the garden vegetables. He ate like a man who'd forgotten food existed. She watched him, trying to see the financial struggle Victor had described. But all she saw was exhaustion. Victor came by today, she said finally. Ezekiel's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. What did he want? He said he was checking on me, being neighborly. Neighborly? Ezekiel set down the spoon. What did he really say? Clara hesitated. Sarah had warned her about repeating Victor's words, but this was her husband, or would be in a few days. If she couldn't trust him, what was the point? He told me the ranch is in trouble, that you're too proud to accept help, that I walked into a sinking ship. Ezekiel's face went hard. He said that. Yes. And you believed him? I don't know what to believe. I've been here 8 days. I don't know anything about ranching or finances or whether we're drowning or thriving. Ezekiel stood and walked to the window, looking out at nothing. The silence stretched until Clara thought he might not answer at all. "We're not rich," he said finally. "Never claimed to be. Last winter was hard. Victor was right about that much. Lost animals. Lost time to cold that wouldn't quit. But we recovered. We always recover." Then why would he say, "Because Victor measures success different than I do. He looks at this place and sees wasted potential, sees money we could be making if only I'd do things his way." Ezekiel turned to face her. He wanted to bring in investors, turn this into some kind of cattle operation run like a factory back east. I said no. Why? Because I've seen what happens when city money comes to the frontier. They squeeze everything dry, take what they want, and leave. I'd rather struggle on my own terms than get rich on someone else's. Clara absorbed this. He also said you keep things from me, that you don't share your worries. You want my worries? Ezekiel's voice hardened. Fine. I worry we won't have enough feed to get through winter. I worry about disease in the herd. I worry about fence lines and broken equipment and whether the creek will run dry in August. I worry about droughts and floods and early snows and late springs. I worry about every damn thing that can go wrong on a ranch because out here, eventually everything does go wrong. He crossed back to the table, leaned on it with both hands. But I don't dump that on you because you've got enough to carry learning how to survive here. Once you're settled, once you know the rhythms of this place, then we'll talk about money and planning and all the rest. But right now, I just need you to learn how to make a life here. Clara met his eyes. And what if I want to help? What if I want to be part of the planning now? You think you're ready for that? I think I'm ready to be treated like a partner instead of a child. Something flickered in Ezekiel's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. All right, he said slowly. Tomorrow, after I teach you to ride, we'll go over the books. I'll show you exactly where we stand. Thank you. He sat back down, picked up his spoon. But, Clara, next time Victor comes around when I'm not here, don't be alone with him. Don't listen to his poison. And sure as hell don't believe anything he says without checking with me first. Sarah already told me the same thing. Good. Then you're learning. They finished supper in silence, but it felt different now. Less like strangers sharing a table and more like something else. Something that might eventually feel like partnership. True to his word, Ezekiel started teaching her to ride the next day. He saddled the gentlest horse on the ranch, a mare named Birdie, who was older than Moses and twice as patient. Clara approached her with the same trepidation she'd felt approaching the chickens on day one. She won't bite, Ezekiel said. Might fall asleep while you're on her, but she won't bite. That's comforting. He showed her how to mount, foot in stirrup, hand on saddle horn, swing the other leg over. It took 3 tries. The first 2 times she didn't have enough momentum and ended up hanging off Birdie's side like a sack of grain. Use your legs, Ezekiel instructed. Push up. The 3rd time she made it, barely. She sat in the saddle feeling like she was perched on top of a mountain that might move at any second. Relax, Ezekiel said. You're stiff as a board. I'm trying not to fall. You're going to fall eventually. Might as well accept it now. He led Birdie around the corral at a walk. Clara gripped the saddle horn like her life depended on it. The motion was strange, rolling, unpredictable. Nothing like the one time she'd ridden as a child at a fair in Philadelphia. Loosen your hips, Ezekiel called. Move with her, not against her. Easier said than done. But gradually, over the course of an hour, Clara started to feel the rhythm, started to understand how her body and Birdie's could find some kind of coordination. Then Ezekiel let go of the lead rope. What are you doing? Teaching you to ride. Can't do that if I'm holding on. I'm not ready. Yes, you are. Just keep her walking. Use the reins to steer. Gentle, though. She's got a soft mouth. Clara took the reins in shaking hands. Birdie continued plodding along like nothing had changed. 1 step. 2. 3. Around the corral they went, Clara's heart hammering, but her body starting to understand this strange new language. Good, Ezekiel said. That's good. They practiced for another hour. By the end, Clara's thighs were screaming and her back felt like someone had beaten it with a board. But she'd stayed on. She'd even managed a few turns without guidance. Enough for today. Ezekiel helped her dismount. Her legs nearly buckled when they hit the ground. "You'll be sore tomorrow." "I'm sore now." "Tomorrow will be worse, but the day after that gets easier." He showed her how to remove the saddle, how to brush Birdie down, where to hang the tack. Clara absorbed it all, filing away information like her life depended on remembering, because maybe it did. That afternoon, as promised, they went over the books. Ezekiel spread ledgers across the kitchen table, years of careful records in his cramped handwriting, income from cattle sales, expenses for feed, equipment, wages for the occasional hired hand. "We're not drowning," he said, running his finger down a column of numbers. "But we're not exactly swimming either. Last year's profit was enough to get us through winter with a little left over. This year should be similar if nothing catastrophic happens. And if something catastrophic does happen, then we tighten our belts and survive. That's how it works out here." Clara studied the numbers. She'd kept her father's household accounts back in Philadelphia. She understood basic arithmetic, income versus outlay. "You could sell some of the north pasture," she said. "The section that's mostly rock. It's not good grazing anyway." Ezekiel looked at her sharp. "You've been paying attention. You said the north fence line needed checking. That means you rode the boundary. And if it needed checking, it's probably because it's not used much." She pointed at the map he'd sketched in the margin of one page. "This section here, it's high and rocky, probably 30 acres that don't do you much good. That's our father's land. Your father's dead." The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but Clara didn't take them back. "And holding on to land that doesn't serve you because of sentiment is just another kind of pride." Ezekiel stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he laughed. "Sarah's right. You've got spine." "Is that a compliment?" "Out here? It's the highest compliment there is." He looked back at the map, considering. "The north section. You might be right. I could sell it to the Hendersons. They've been asking about expanding. Wouldn't bring in a fortune, but it would give us breathing room. And it would shut Victor up about you refusing to be practical." "There's that too." Ezekiel closed the ledger. "All right, I'll think about it." The week rolled on. Clara practiced riding every morning, her muscles screaming, her balance improving in tiny increments. She learned which cows were mean and which were just skittish. She figured out that the pump handle stuck unless you worked it at a specific angle. She made bread that actually rose properly. And slowly, she and Ezekiel began to find a rhythm. He still wasn't talkative. That would probably never change. But he started staying for breakfast instead of grabbing food and running. Started asking her opinion on small things. Started looking at her less like a problem to solve and more like a person. On the 13th day, the judge came. He arrived in a dusty buggy, a tired-looking man in a suit that had seen better days. Sarah made coffee while Ezekiel and Clara stood in the main room, awkward as teenagers. "You both understand what you're agreeing to?" The judge looked between them. "Marriage in the Montana Territory is binding. No easy divorces out here." "We understand," Ezekiel said. "And you, Miss Linwood, you're entering this marriage of your own free will? No coercion?" "None." "Good enough." The judge pulled out paperwork. "Let's make it official." The ceremony, if you could call it that, lasted maybe 5 minutes. Repeat after me. "I do. I do. Sign here." Witnessed by Sarah and a ranch hand Ezekiel had called in for the occasion. And just like that, Clara Linwood became Clara Boone. She felt nothing, or maybe everything. It was too big to process. The fact that she was married, that this quiet man beside her was now her husband, that her entire future had just been locked into place with a signature. The judge left. Sarah hugged her, quick and rough. The ranch hand congratulated Ezekiel and fled back to work. Then it was just the two of them. "Well," Ezekiel said finally, "that's done." "Yes." More awkward silence. "I'll move my things back into the house tonight," he continued. "Unless you'd rather I waited." "No, it's your house, our house." Clara swallowed. "We're married. We should be married." He nodded, cleared his throat. "Right. Well, I've got fence work, and you've probably got things." "Things?" "Yes." He grabbed his hat and escaped. Clara stood in the empty house, Mrs. Clara Boone, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to feel. That night was the most uncomfortable of her life. Ezekiel moved his belongings back into the bedroom, a bedroll, a change of clothes, not much else. They got ready for bed in painful silence, both trying not to look at each other, both hyper-aware of every movement. Clara changed into her nightgown behind the dressing screen Sarah had helped her set up. When she emerged, Ezekiel was already in bed, turned toward the wall. She climbed in on her side. The rope mattress creaked under her weight. Ezekiel didn't move. They lay there in the dark, a careful foot of space between them, both pretending to sleep. Clara's mind raced. Was he disappointed? Disgusted? Regretting the whole arrangement? Should she say something? Do something? She had no idea how this was supposed to work. After what felt like hours, Ezekiel spoke. "You don't have to be nervous." "I'm not nervous." "You're breathing like you're about to bolt." Clara forced herself to breathe slower. "This is strange." "Yes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "Neither do I." He shifted slightly. "We'll figure it out, same as everything else." "Is that what marriage is? Just figuring things out?" "I think so. At least out here." The honesty in his voice steadied her somehow. He was just as lost as she was. Neither of them had done this before. "Ezekiel?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For being patient. Get some sleep, Clara. Morning comes early." She closed her eyes. Eventually, exhaustion won over anxiety, and she drifted off. When she woke in the gray light before dawn, Ezekiel was already gone. But his side of the bed was still warm. It was something. The weeks that followed fell into pattern. Work, meals, sleep. Slowly getting used to sharing space with another person. Ezekiel moved around her in the kitchen without bumping into her. She learned not to startle when he came in from the barn unexpectedly. Small domestic accommodations that felt enormous. Clara's riding improved. She graduated from Birdie to a younger horse named Sam, who actually required skill to control. She learned to saddle her own mount, to check hooves for stones, to read weather in the sky and adjust accordingly, and she started venturing into town with Sarah. Red Hollow hadn't gotten friendlier, but Clara had gotten harder. The whispers still followed her through the general store. Women still pulled their children aside when she passed, but she held her head up and ignored them, buying what she needed and leaving without giving them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. "You're learning," Sarah said approvingly after one such trip. "Learning that their opinions don't mean shit." Victor she saw occasionally, always at a distance, always watching. He never approached her directly again, not after Sarah's warning, but his presence lingered like smoke. Then October came, and with it the incident that would change everything. Clara was riding alone for the first time. Ezekiel had reluctantly agreed she was ready for short solo trips. She was checking the eastern fence line, the task simple enough that even she couldn't mess it up. The day was beautiful. Clear sky, crisp air, the aspens turning gold on the hillsides. She was actually enjoying herself, feeling competent for maybe the first time since arriving. She didn't see the snake until Sam did. The horse reared. Clara grabbed for the saddle horn, but her grip slipped, everything tilted. Sky and ground switching places. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, her head cracking against something hard. Pain exploded through her left leg. She lay there gasping, trying to understand what had happened. Sam stood a few feet away, sides heaving, reins trailing. Her leg felt wrong, bent at an angle that made her stomach lurch. She tried to sit up. The pain made her vision white out. Not good. This was not good. "Help!" she called out. But there was no one to hear. She was half a mile from the ranch house, alone, with a leg that might be broken and a horse too spooked to come near her. Time did strange things. She might have lain there for 10 minutes or an hour. The sun moved, shadows shifted, the pain settled into something constant and terrible. Then hoofbeats. "Clara!" Ezekiel's voice. He appeared on the ridge, saw her on the ground, and spurred his horse into a run. He was beside her in seconds, dismounting before his horse fully stopped. "What happened?" "Snake." Sam spooked. "I fell." His hands moved over her carefully, checking. When he touched her leg, she screamed, all right, I've got you." His face was white. "I need to get you back to the house. This is going to hurt." "My dress." The fabric had torn in the fall, exposing her leg from mid-thigh down. "Forget the dress. I need to see what we're dealing with." He pulled a knife from his belt. Clara's breath caught. I'm going to cut this fabric away from the injury, he said calmly. Need to immobilize the leg before I move you. Understand? She nodded, teeth gritted. The knife made quick work of her skirt, tearing it further up her leg to expose the injury. Clara felt the exposure like a brand. This was shameful, improper, wrong, but the pain overwhelmed everything else. Definitely broken. Ezekiel was already using his belt to fashion a splint with pieces of fence post. But the bone hasn't broken skin. That's good. His hands were gentle despite their roughness, securing the splint with practiced efficiency. Then he lifted her. She cried out despite trying to stay quiet, and carried her to his horse. Getting her into the saddle was agony. Ezekiel mounted behind her, one arm wrapped around her waist to hold her steady. Clara leaned back against his chest, shaking with pain and shock. "Stay with me," he murmured. "We're almost there." The ride back blurred. Clara drifted in and out, aware only of pain and Ezekiel's steady heartbeat against her back. Sarah was in the yard when they arrived. She took one look and started barking orders. Between them, they got Clara into the house, onto the bed. Ezekiel sent the ranch hand for the doctor in Red Hollow. "He'll be ours," Sarah said grimly. "Best we can do is keep her comfortable until then." She brought water, laudanum from the medicine chest. Clara drank it gratefully, the drug blurring the edges of everything. Ezekiel sat beside the bed, still as stone, his hands clenched into fists. "This is my fault," he said. "I shouldn't have let you go alone." "Wasn't your fault," Clara managed. "Was a snake." Still, the laudanum pulled her under. When she surfaced again, it was night. The doctor was there, a thin man who smelled of whiskey and carbolic. He examined her leg with hands that shook slightly. "Clean break," he announced. "Could be worse. I'll set it, but she needs to stay off it for 6 weeks minimum." 6 weeks? Unless you want it to heal crooked, then she'll limp the rest of her life. They set the bone. Clara bit down on a leather strap and tried not to scream. Tried and failed. When it was done, she lay trembling and sweating, her leg wrapped tight in proper splints and bandages. The doctor packed his bag. "Keep it clean. Change the bandages every few days. If it starts to smell bad or she gets a fever, send for me immediately." Ezekiel paid him and showed him out. Then it was just Clara and the pain and the long night ahead. She woke sometime before dawn to find Ezekiel asleep in the chair beside the bed. His head was tipped back at an uncomfortable angle, his face drawn even in sleep. She must have made a sound because his eyes opened immediately. "How's the pain?" "Bad." He gave her more laudanum. She drifted. When she woke again, it was full morning and Sarah was there instead of Ezekiel. "He's outside," Sarah said, reading her expression. "Been here all night. I finally kicked him out to do something useful. I ruined everything. You broke your leg. Happens to everyone eventually. But the work will get done. We'll manage." Sarah's expression softened. "You just focus on healing." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the accident had cracked more than just her leg. She wouldn't know how right she was until 3 days later, when the rumors started. Sarah came back from town 3 days after the accident with her face like carved granite. Clara was propped up in bed trying to mend a shirt one-handed while her splinted leg throbbed despite the laudanum. She looked up when the door banged open harder than necessary. "What's wrong?" Sarah set down her basket with enough force to rattle the eggs inside. "We need to talk." The tone made Clara's stomach drop. "What happened?" "The whole damn town is talking." Sarah's jaw worked. "About you. About Ezekiel. About what they think happened out there when you fell. I don't understand. Someone saw him bring you back, saw your dress torn up, your leg exposed, saw him carrying you." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "And they're saying he dishonored you." The words didn't make sense at first. Claire's brain tried to rearrange them into something logical. "That's insane. He was helping me. My leg was broken." "I know that. You know that. But Red Hollow doesn't care about the truth when a lie is more interesting." Sarah sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. "They're saying he took advantage, that the accident was convenient, that a man like him would use any excuse to violate his wife in broad daylight." Heat flooded Clara's face. Shame and fury tangled together. "That's disgusting." "Yes, it is. But it's spreading like wildfire. By tomorrow, the whole territory will have heard some version of it. Who started it? Who's saying these things? Sarah's expression went dark. Take a guess. Victor. Of course it was Victor. Clara's hands shook so badly she had to set down her mending. We have to tell people what really happened. The doctor saw a woman with a broken leg and a torn dress. He saw what he wanted to see. Sarah leaned forward. Clara, listen to me. The truth doesn't matter to these people. They've already decided. Ezekiel's the outsider who keeps to himself. You're the desperate woman from back east. In their minds, this confirms everything they suspected. Then what do we do? I don't know yet, but Ezekiel needs to know. He's out at the south pasture. I sent the hand to fetch him. They sat in heavy silence until hoofbeats announced Ezekiel's arrival. He came through the door like a storm, hat still on, dust coating his clothes. Tell me. Sarah repeated what she'd told Clara. Ezekiel's face went from confusion to fury in the span of seconds. Who exactly is saying this? Started with Victor, near as I can tell. He was at the saloon night before last, buying drinks, expressing concern about his poor brother's unfortunate situation. Sarah's voice dripped acid. By morning, half the town had heard that you'd compromised your own wife in the middle of nowhere. Ezekiel turned and punched the doorframe hard enough to split his knuckles. Clara flinched. That son of a bitch. He's playing a long game, Sarah said quietly. This isn't just about embarrassing you. He's undermining your reputation, making people question whether you're fit to run this ranch, whether you're fit to be part of this community. I don't give a damn about the community. Maybe not, but you care about this ranch. And if the whole territory thinks you're some kind of deviant, good luck getting fair prices for your cattle. Good luck getting help when you need it. Good luck with anything. Ezekiel paced like a caged animal. Clara watched him, helpless, hating that she was stuck in this bed while everything fell apart. We could leave, she said suddenly. Go somewhere else. Start over. Both of them looked at her. And let Victor win? Ezekiel's voice was hard. Let him spread his poison and drive us out? No, this is my land, our land now. I'm not running. Then what? Clara's voice rose. We just sit here while they tear us apart. We fight back. How? Ezekiel stopped pacing. His eyes went distant, calculating. A public meeting. We call them out. Make them face us directly instead of whispering behind our backs. That's a terrible idea, Sarah said flatly. You got a better one? Yes. Keep your heads down. Let it blow over. These things always do eventually. Not this time. Ezekiel shook his head. Victor's too smart for that. He'll keep feeding the fire, keep it burning until there's nothing left of my reputation. Clara's mind raced. What if we had witnesses, people who saw what really happened? There were no witnesses. That's the problem. But the doctor's already saying he can't speak to what happened before he arrived. I asked him. Ezekiel's expression was bitter. He doesn't want to get involved. None of them do. The hopelessness of it settled over Clara like a blanket. They were trapped. The truth didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. In Red Hollow's collective imagination, Ezekiel was already guilty. That night, Clara lay awake, listening to Ezekiel move around the main room. He wasn't sleeping either. She could hear him pacing, could picture him wearing a groove in the floorboards. Finally, she called out, Ezekiel! The pacing stopped. He appeared in the doorway. You should be sleeping. So should you. She struggled to sit up. Come here. He hesitated, then crossed to sit on the edge of the bed. In the lamplight, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face. This isn't your fault, Clara said. Feels like it is. Victor would have found some way to attack you regardless. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else. She reached for his hand. He let her take it. He's jealous. Bitter. That's all this is. Doesn't make it hurt less. No, but it means we can't let him win. Claire squeezed his hand. If we're going to do this meeting, and I think we should, then we need to be smart about it. Strategic. You sound like you have a plan. Maybe. I need to think it through. Her mind was already working, pieces falling into place. But Ezekiel, whatever happens, we face it together. That's what marriage means, right? Partnership. Something shifted in his expression. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I'm stronger than anyone gave me credit for, including myself. He almost smiled. Get some rest. We'll figure this out in the morning. But morning brought a new complication. The sheriff arrived just after breakfast, a thick-bodied man named Carson with a handlebar mustache and eyes that had seen too much. Ezekiel. He touched his hat brim. Mrs. Boone. Sorry to intrude. What can I do for you, Sheriff? Carson shifted his weight uncomfortably. There's been some talk around town. Serious talk. The kind that if left unchecked could turn into real trouble. I'm aware. Then you know why I'm here. The sheriff glanced at Clara, then away. I need to ask some questions. Official-like. Ezekiel's jaw tightened. Ask. Mrs. Boone, can you tell me what happened 3 days ago when you fell from your horse? Clara straightened despite the pain in her leg. I was checking the eastern fence line. My horse spooked at a snake. I fell and broke my leg. My husband found me and brought me home. That's all. And the state of your clothing? What about it? It was reported to me that your dress was significantly damaged, torn. It tore when I fell, and my husband had to cut it further to splint my leg properly. You can ask the doctor. He saw the splint, saw the injury. He'll confirm it was a clean break that needed immediate treatment. Carson nodded slowly. And Mr. Boone, you're saying nothing else occurred? Nothing improper? Ezekiel's voice went deadly quiet. Are you asking me if I assaulted my own wife? I'm asking for the official record. The official record can show that I found my wife injured, treated her injury the best I could, and got her to a doctor as fast as possible. If that's a crime in Red Hollow, maybe I'm living in the wrong territory. No one's saying it's a crime, but there are questions. Questions from who? Victor? Ezekiel took a step forward. Let me guess. My concerned brother came to you with his worries, painted himself as the family man looking out for his sister-in-law's well-being. Carson's silence was answer enough. I thought so. Ezekiel's hands clenched. You can tell Victor and anyone else interested that if they have accusations to make, they can make them to my face, not hide behind official inquiries and gossip. That's actually why I'm here. Carson pulled a paper from his jacket. There's going to be a town meeting tomorrow night to address the concerns that have been raised. Clara's stomach dropped. A meeting about what exactly? About whether certain behaviors are acceptable in this community, about standards of conduct. Carson looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Look, between you and me, I think this is horseshit, but enough people have raised concerns that the mayor felt obligated to address it publicly. The mayor being Victor's drinking buddy, Sarah interjected from the doorway. No one had heard her approach. Carson didn't deny it. The meeting's at 7 tomorrow, Town Hall. You're both welcome to attend and speak on your own behalf. Welcome, Ezekiel repeated flatly. How generous. After the sheriff left, the three of them stood in tense silence. This is worse than I thought, Sarah said finally. They're trying to make an example of you. Let them try. Clara surprised herself with the steel in her own voice. We'll go to this meeting, we'll tell the truth, and we'll make them look us in the eye while they judge. You can barely walk, Ezekiel protested. Then you'll help me. But I'm going. She met his gaze. This is my reputation too. My marriage. I'm not hiding while they tear it apart. That night Clara barely slept. Her mind worked through scenarios, arguments, approaches. By morning she had the bones of a plan. She shared it with Ezekiel over breakfast. It's risky, he said when she finished. Everything's risky at this point. If it backfires, then we're no worse off than we already are. Clara pushed her plate aside. But if it works, we don't just defend ourselves. We go on offense. Sarah had been listening from across the room. You want to expose Victor. I want to show everyone what he really is. Not the concerned brother, not the gentleman rancher, the bitter, jealous man who's been manipulating them all along. You have proof? Clara thought of the conversation with Victor weeks ago, his thinly veiled threats, his smooth manipulation. Some. Enough to plant doubt. And if we can get him talking in front of everyone, it could work, Sarah admitted grudgingly. Or it could blow up in our faces spectacularly. I'm willing to take that risk. Clara looked at Ezekiel. Are you? He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Let's do it. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Sarah helped Clara practice walking with a crutch Ezekiel fashioned from a sturdy branch. The pain was intense, but Clara gritted her teeth and pushed through it. She needed to be able to stand tomorrow, needed to face this town on her feet, not cowering in a chair. Ezekiel rode into town to speak with a few people. Clara didn't ask who. When he returned, his expression was grim but determined. "I found someone," was all he said. That night, Clara lay awake, running through everything that could go wrong. The pain in her leg was constant despite the laudanum, but worse was the fear that they were walking into a trap with no way out. Ezekiel was awake too. She could feel the tension radiating from him. "What are you thinking?" she asked the darkness. "That I'm sorry for all of this. You came here for a better life, and I've given you nothing but trouble. You've given me partnership, respect, a place to stand." Clara shifted to look at him. "That's more than I had in Philadelphia. Still, this isn't what you signed up for. Neither is a broken leg, or cruel gossip, or any of it." She found his hand in the dark. "But I'm here anyway, and I'm not leaving." His fingers tightened around hers. They fell asleep like that, holding on. The next day crawled by. Clara forced herself to eat, though her stomach was knotted. She dressed in her best remaining dress, the gray one from the train, mended and cleaned. Sarah helped her with her hair, pinning it severe and proper. "You look formidable," Sarah said with approval. "I feel like I'm going to vomit." "Save it for after. Vomiting before a fight is just wasteful." At 6:30 they climbed into the wagon. The ride into town was silent, each of them lost in thought. As they approached Red Hollow, Clara could see people converging on the town hall from all directions. The whole territory must have turned out. "Popular event," Ezekiel said dryly. "Everyone loves a good scandal." Sarah's voice was bitter. They pulled up outside the hall. Ezekiel came around to help Clara down. She leaned on her crutch, breathing through the pain, refusing to show weakness. People stared as they made their way inside. Clara felt every eye on her, heard the whispers starting up like insects buzzing. She kept her head high, her gaze forward. The hall was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. At the front, a makeshift podium had been set up. The mayor, a florid man named Hutchins, stood talking to several town council members. And there, off to the side, was Victor. He was dressed impeccably as always, his expression one of practiced concern. When he saw them enter, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. He hadn't expected them to show. Good, let him sweat. Ezekiel guided Clara to chairs in the front row that someone had reluctantly vacated. Sarah sat on her other side, a wall of protection. At precisely 7, Mayor Hutchins banged a gavel. "All right, folks, settle down. Let's get this started." His jowls quivered as he spoke. "We're here tonight to address some serious concerns that have been brought to the council's attention. Concerns about moral conduct and the standards we expect from members of our community." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "Now, before we get into specifics, I want to remind everyone that this is a civil proceeding. We're here to air grievances and find resolution, not to point fingers or cast stones." Hutchins looked meaningfully around the room. "With that said, Victor Boone has brought forward some troubling allegations regarding his brother Ezekiel. Victor, would you like to speak?" Victor stood with apparent reluctance, like he was being forced into this against his will. The bastard was a good actor. Clara had to give him that. "Thank you, Mayor Hutchins. I want to start by saying this pains me deeply. Ezekiel is my brother, my blood. But I have a moral obligation to this community that supersedes family loyalty." He paused, letting that sink in. 3 days ago, Mrs. Clara Boone suffered an accident while riding alone. According to multiple witnesses, when Ezekiel brought her back to the ranch, her clothing was severely damaged. Her leg was exposed in a manner that no decent woman would allow unless something improper had occurred. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Victor continued, "this occurred in a remote location with no witnesses. Only Ezekiel's word about what transpired. And while I desperately want to believe my brother acted honorably, the appearance of the situation raises serious questions." "That's enough." Ezekiel's voice cut through the hall like a whip. He stood, and the room went silent. "You want to accuse me of something, Victor, then say it plain. Stop hiding behind concern and implications." Victor's mask slipped for just a second, Clara saw the flash of triumph in his eyes. This was what he wanted. Ezekiel angry and defensive. I'm not accusing you of anything, brother. I'm simply asking for clarity, for the sake of Mrs. Boone's reputation, if nothing else. Her reputation? Ezekiel's laugh was harsh. You've been working to destroy her reputation since the moment she arrived. Don't pretend this is about protecting her. That's a serious accusation, is it? Because I remember you visiting our ranch when I wasn't home. Remember you filling her head with lies about our finances, trying to make her doubt me. Remember you watching us like a hawk, waiting for something, anything you could twist into scandal. Victor's expression hardened. I was trying to help. Help yourself, maybe. Ezekiel turned to address the room. My brother wants this ranch. He's wanted it since our father died and left it to me. Everything he's done since, the legal challenges, the spreading of rumors, this meeting tonight, it's all been about taking what he thinks he's owed. That's a lie. Victor's composure finally cracked. I've built my own life, my own prospects. I don't need your failing ranch. Then why are you here? Clara's voice rang out clear and strong. She struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on the crutch. If you don't care about the ranch, if you're not trying to undermine Ezekiel, then why dedicate so much energy to destroying us? All eyes turned to her. Mrs. Boone? Mayor Hutchins started. Perhaps you should sit. I'll stand. Clara's legs trembled, but she locked her knees. You want to know what happened 3 days ago? I'll tell you. Every detail. She described it all. The ride, the snake, the fall, the sickening crack of her leg breaking. Lying there alone, terrified, in more pain than she'd ever experienced. My husband found me. He assessed the situation and realized my leg was broken badly enough that moving me without stabilization could cause permanent damage. So he did what any competent man would do. He used the materials at hand to splint it. That meant cutting my dress to access the injury. That meant exposing my leg. She looked around the room, meeting eyes. Was it improper? By the standards of a Philadelphia drawing room, yes. But we're not in Philadelphia. We're on the frontier, where sometimes survival matters more than modesty. My husband saved my leg. Possibly my life if infection had set in during a longer delay. And for that, you want to hang him. No one's talking about hanging anyone, Hutchins said quickly. Aren't you? You've called this meeting, put us on trial, all based on what? The word of a man who has demonstrable bias against my husband? Clara turned to Victor. Tell them. Tell them about visiting me when Ezekiel was gone, about your concerns for our finances, about how you've been trying to drive a wedge between us since day one. I was trying to help you. Liar. The word came out flat and cold. You saw me as a weakness, a way to get to Ezekiel. You thought a desperate woman from back east would be easy to manipulate, would believe your stories, cause problems in the marriage, maybe even leave. Clara took a painful step forward. But I didn't leave. So you needed a new strategy. This is absurd, is it? Because I'm starting to wonder if maybe you had something to do with my accident. The room erupted, voices shouting over each other, Hutchins banging his gavel. Victor's face went white with fury. That's slander! Is it? You were very interested in my riding schedule, asked Sarah about it several times, and my horse spooked at a snake, but I never actually saw a snake. Just heard something in the brush and Sam reared. Clara was improvising now, working on instinct and fury. She had no proof, but she could see doubt creeping into faces around the room. I would never... Victor sputtered. Never what? Never try to hurt someone to get what you want? Clara looked at the mayor. Ask him about Catherine Mills. Victor went rigid. Don't. Who's Catherine Mills? Someone called out. A woman Victor courted 2 years ago, Clara said, not sure where this was going, but trusting her gut. Before he came back to Red Hollow, ask him what happened to her. That has nothing to do with this. Was there a woman named Catherine Mills? Sheriff Carson spoke up from the back of the room. Because I recall hearing something about that. Some trouble back in Denver. Victor's face was a mask of fury now, all pretense of concern gone. That was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that ended with her family running you out of town? An older man near the front spoke up. I remember now. You promised her marriage, took money from her father for a business venture, then disappeared when the venture failed, left her ruined. The crowd's mood was shifting. Claire could feel it like a change in air pressure. That's not... I never... Victor looked around wildly, seeing his support crumbling. This is a distraction. We're here to discuss Ezekiel's conduct, not dig up ancient history about your pattern of manipulating and betraying people? Sarah stood now too. About how you've been playing this town like a fiddle, feeding them stories designed to make Ezekiel look bad so you could swoop in and take over? I don't have to listen to this. Victor turned to leave. Sit down. Sheriff Carson's voice cracked like a whip. We're not done here. Victor froze. Carson moved through the crowd to the front. I've been doing some thinking since yesterday about who benefits from all this scandal. Who's been stoking the fires, buying drinks, making sure everyone heard the worst possible version of events. He looked at Victor. And it all comes back to you. I'm a concerned citizen. You're a snake. The words came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store. I've watched you work for 2 years now, always smooth, always helpful, always with an angle. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. Other voices joined in, people who'd been whispering in corners now speaking up. Stories of Victor's manipulations, small cruelties, calculated rumors. It poured out like poison lanced from a wound. Victor's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. You're all fools. Ezekiel's failing. The ranch is dying. I could have saved it, modernized it, made it profitable. But he's too stubborn, too proud to accept help from anyone. There it is. Ezekiel's voice was quiet, but it carried. The truth. You don't care about my wife's honor or community standards. You want my land. I deserve that land, Victor was shouting now, all control gone. I'm the one who went to school, learned business, brought back knowledge. But Father left everything to you because you stayed and played cowboy. It's not fair. Fair? Ezekiel moved toward his brother. You want to talk about fair? You left. You chose to go east, chase your ambitions. I stayed and worked myself half to death keeping the ranch alive. I earned what Father left me. By being the dutiful son, the boring, dependable, by being there, by showing up, by caring about something other than myself. Ezekiel's hands were fists, but he kept them at his sides. And when you finally came back and I offered to work with you, you couldn't accept being second. Had to undermine me, sabotage me, try to tear down everything I built. Because you don't deserve it. Victor's face was twisted with years of resentment. You're not special, Ezekiel. You're just stubborn. And now you've tied yourself to this woman who... Finish that sentence. Claire's voice was ice. Say what you really think about me. Victor turned to her, mask completely gone. You're a desperate, pathetic creature who latched onto my brother because no one else would have you. You're an embarrassment, a burden, and you're too stupid to see that this whole arrangement is doomed. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Clara smiled. Thank you. For what? For finally showing everyone who you really are. She looked around the room. You all heard it. The concern, the worry for my welfare, all lies. He doesn't care about honor or decency. He just hates that I exist. Hates that Ezekiel chose to marry rather than wallow in the loneliness Victor was counting on. Mayor Hutchins cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, I think we've heard enough. I agree, Sheriff Carson said. Mrs. Boone, Mr. Boone, I believe your account of what happened. I'm sorry this got as far as it did. Sorry? Victor's laugh was unhinged. You're taking their word over mine? I'm the one who brought this to you, who tried to protect this community from what? A man taking care of his injured wife. Carson's expression was disgusted. Go home, Victor, or better yet, go back to Denver, because I suspect you're not going to find Red Hollow very welcoming from here on out. Victor looked around the room at faces that had gone cold. The realization of what he'd lost seemed to hit him all at once. His whole careful plan, unraveled by his own temper. This isn't over, he said, but there was no power in it. Yes, it is. Ezekiel's voice was final. Stay away from my wife. Stay away from my ranch. If I see you anywhere near us, I'll assume your intentions are violent and act accordingly. It was a clear threat. No one objected. Victor straightened his vest with shaking hands, trying to recover some dignity, but it was too late. He'd revealed himself completely. He walked out of the hall with his back rigid, and Clara knew they'd never see him as a threat again. The crowd began to disperse, people talking in low voices. Several approached to apologize, to Clara, to Ezekiel. Some looked genuine, others just wanted to distance themselves from Victor's loss. Clara barely heard them. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her shaking and exhausted. Her leg was screaming. She swayed on her crutch. Ezekiel caught her. "I've got you." "We did it," she whispered. "You did it. That was all you." Sarah appeared with the wagon. "Let's get out of here before you collapse." The ride home was quiet. Clara dozed against Ezekiel's shoulder, too tired for words. When they reached the ranch, he carried her inside and settled her in bed. "Sleep," he ordered. "We'll talk tomorrow." But Clara caught his hand before he could leave. "Thank you for believing in me, for standing with me. You stood with me first." He squeezed her hand gently. "Get some rest, Mrs. Boone. You earned it." She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and Ezekiel was sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Morning." "Is it?" Clara's voice was scratchy. "Feels like I've been asleep for days." "Just one, though you needed it." He poured water from the pitcher, helped her drink. "How's the leg?" "Hurts less than yesterday. Or maybe I'm just too tired to care." He smiled, a real smile, not his usual half-grimace. "You were extraordinary last night. I was terrified. Didn't show. You faced down that whole room like you owned it. I was mostly making things up as I went. The part about Catherine Mills. How did you know about her?" Clara shrugged. "I didn't. Not really. But Victor's face when I mentioned Denver told me I'd hit something, so I pushed." Ezekiel laughed. Actually laughed. A sound she'd almost never heard. "You're dangerous." "Only when I need to be." He sobered. "Victor's leaving. Heard from the sheriff this morning. He's packing up, heading back east. Apparently several people made it clear he wasn't welcome here anymore." "Good. Good," Ezekiel echoed. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Sorry you had to defend yourself, defend us, in front of that mob. They weren't all a mob. Some of them listened, changed their minds. Because you made them." He leaned forward. "Clara, I know this hasn't been easy. No, this wasn't what you expected when you answered my letters. But I want you to know I'm glad you're here. Glad you stayed. Glad you're my wife." The words hit somewhere deep in her chest. "I'm glad too." "Even with the broken leg and the scandal and all of it?" "Even with all of it." Clara reached for his hand. "This is where I belong. With you. On this ranch. Building something real." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture so unexpected it made her breath catch. "Then let's build it," he said. "Together." Outside, the sun climbed higher. The chickens squawked. Cattle lowed in the distance. The ordinary sounds of the ranch going on, surviving, enduring. And inside, Clara Boone closed her eyes and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. Recovery was slower than Clara expected and harder than she wanted to admit. The first week after the town meeting passed in a haze of pain and laudanum-induced sleep. Her leg throbbed constantly, a deep ache that made her teeth clench even when she was trying to rest. The splint itched. She couldn't find a comfortable position. And worst of all, she was useless. Completely, utterly useless. Sarah handled the cooking. Ezekiel managed everything else. Clara sat propped up in bed or hobbled to the chair by the window, watching life happen around her while contributing nothing. It ate at her. "You need to let it heal," Sarah said on the 8th day, catching Clara trying to stand without the crutch. "Push it too soon and you'll be limping the rest of your life." "I can't just sit here." "Yes, you can, and you will." Sarah's tone left no room for argument. "Your body needs time. Give it time." But time felt like an enemy. Clara watched November arrive through the window, the aspens losing their gold, the sky turning that particular shade of gray that promised snow. She watched Ezekiel leave before dawn and return after dark, exhausted from doing the work of two people. She watched and hated her own helplessness. On the 10th day, she made it to the kitchen table for breakfast. Small victory, but it felt enormous. Ezekiel looked up from his coffee, surprised. "Should you be up?" "I'm going insane in that bed." "Fair enough." He pushed a plate toward her. "Eat." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Ezekiel cleared his throat. I sold the north section. Clara looked up. The rocky pasture? Yeah, Henderson's gave me a fair price. More than fair, actually. I think they felt bad about the whole town meeting situation. He pulled a ledger from his jacket. It gives us enough cushion to get through winter comfortably. Maybe even hire help in spring. That's good. It's more than good. It's because of you. He met her eyes. You were right about that land. About a lot of things. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. We're partners. That's what partners do. Tell each other the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Still getting used to that. Ezekiel's smile was crooked. Never had a partner before. Neither have I. The moment hung between them, fragile and new. Then Brutus barked outside and Ezekiel stood, breaking the spell. I've got to check the herd. You need anything before I go? Just promise you'll be back for supper. Actual supper, not whatever you've been eating in the barn. Yes, ma'am. After he left, Clara sat at the table feeling oddly content. The pain in her leg was still there, but manageable. The house was quiet but not empty, and for the first time since the accident, she felt like maybe she could see a path forward. Sarah came in an hour later, arms full of mending. Since you're determined to be useful, the older woman said, dumping the pile on the table, you can make yourself useful with this. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Clara picked up the first shirt, one of Ezekiel's, torn at the shoulder. Thank you. For what? For not treating me like I'm made of glass. Sarah snorted. You stood up to Victor and an entire town while standing on one leg. Glass is the last thing I'd call you. They worked in comfortable silence, needles moving in practiced rhythm. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Storm coming, Sarah observed. How can you tell? Bones ache, sky's too still. Animals are nervous. She knotted a thread and bit it off. We'll see snow by tomorrow. Mark my words. She was right. Clara woke the next morning to a world transformed. Snow covered everything. Not the light dusting she'd seen in Philadelphia, but real frontier snow. Drifts piled against the barn. The corral fence posts wore white caps. Everything muffled and strange. Ezekiel was already up, layering on extra clothes. How bad is it? Could be worse, but I need to get the cattle to lower ground before it gets heavier. He pulled on thick gloves. Sarah's staying here with you. Don't try to go outside. Ground's ice underneath all that white. You'll fall and break the other leg. I'm not that stupid. Just making sure. He hesitated by the door. Keep the fire going. If I'm not back by dark, don't worry. Sometimes these things take longer than expected. Then he was gone, swallowed by white. The day crept by. Clara kept the fire fed, worked on mending, tried not to think about Ezekiel out in that cold. Sarah came and went, checking on the chickens, bringing in wood, moving with the competence of someone who'd survived 20 Montana winters. Afternoon faded to evening. No Ezekiel. He's fine, Sarah said, reading Clara's expression. Man knows this land like his own hand. He'll be back when he's back. But worry gnawed at Clara anyway. She remembered the snake that had spooked Sam, remembered how quickly things could go wrong out here. A horse could slip, a man could freeze. Accidents happened. Full dark came. Still no Ezekiel. Clara sat by the window, watching snow continue to fall, each minute feeling like an hour. Finally, around 8, she heard it, hoofbeats. Then Ezekiel's voice calling to the horses. Relief flooded through her so intensely it made her dizzy. He came in stamping snow from his boots, face red from cold, ice crusted in his beard stubble. All accounted for, he announced. Cattle are down in the South Valley where there's windbreak. Should be fine unless this keeps up for days. You look frozen. I am frozen. He moved toward the fire, hands outstretched. Any coffee left? Clara poured him a cup, added a generous slug of whiskey from the bottle Sarah kept for medicinal purposes. He drank it gratefully, color slowly returning to his face. You were worried, he said, not looking at her. Of course I was worried. You were out in a blizzard. This isn't a blizzard. You'll know a blizzard when you see one. But there was something in his voice, pleasure, maybe, that someone had worried about him. Sarah appeared from her cabin, took one look at Ezekiel, and started pulling out food. Within minutes, she'd assembled a meal of cold venison, bread, and the last of the preserves. They ate together, the three of them, while wind howled outside and the fire crackled. Clara watched Ezekiel eat like he hadn't seen food in days and felt something shift inside her. This was hers. This life, this place, this man who came home half frozen because cattle needed tending. It wasn't what she'd imagined back in Philadelphia. It was harder, stranger, more real. But it was hers. The storm lasted 3 days. By the time it cleared, snow was piled higher than Clara's waist in places. Ezekiel spent those days digging out paths, checking on livestock, keeping everything running. Clara and Sarah worked inside, cooking, mending, keeping the house warm. On the 4th day, sunshine broke through, brilliant, blinding, turning the whole world into a cascade of diamonds. "Come on," Ezekiel said after breakfast. "You've been cooped up long enough. I can barely walk, not asking you to walk far, just to the porch." He helped her outside. The cold bit her face immediately, sharp and clean, but the beauty made up for it. Snow sparkling in the sun, the sky, that particular shade of blue that only came after storms, mountains standing clear and white in the distance. "It's incredible," Clara breathed. "It's Montana." Ezekiel stood beside her, not touching, but close. "You get used to it." "I don't think I'll ever get used to it." "Good. Means you'll keep seeing it." They stood there for a while, watching the world in silence. Then Clara shivered and Ezekiel guided her back inside. But something had changed in those moments on the porch. Some recognition that this place was becoming home, whether she'd planned for it or not. By December, Clara could walk short distances without the crutch. The leg still ached, especially in cold weather, but the bone was healing straight. The doctor came to check on her and pronounced himself satisfied. "You'll have a limp for a while," he said. "Maybe permanent, but you'll walk. That's more than some can say after a break like that." Clara accepted this. Vanity seemed pointless out here. What mattered was function, not grace. She started taking over cooking duties again, much to Sarah's relief. Started managing the house, the chickens, the small daily tasks that kept a ranch running. Her body adapted, muscles strengthening, balance adjusting to compensate for the injured leg. And slowly, carefully, her marriage adapted too. Ezekiel talked more now. Not constantly, he'd never be a chatterbox, but enough. He'd tell her about the cattle, about plans for spring, about small observations from his day. And he asked her opinions, actually listened when she offered them. They fell into rhythms. Morning coffee together before he left. Evening meals where they went over accounts or discussed what needed doing. Nights where they lay in bed, not touching but aware of each other, the space between them growing less awkward. One night in mid-December, Clara woke to find Ezekiel sitting by the window. "Can't sleep?" Thinking. He didn't turn around. "About what?" "Victor. Whether he's really gone or just waiting." Clara sat up carefully, mindful of her leg. "You think he'd come back?" "I don't know. Probably not. But I can't shake the feeling that the other shoe hasn't dropped yet. Maybe there is no other shoe. Maybe we won, and that's it." "Doesn't feel like winning." Clara considered this. What would winning feel like? "I don't know." He finally turned to look at her. "Not this. Not constantly waiting for the next disaster." "That's not Victor. That's just life out here." Clara swung her legs out of bed, crossed to sit beside him. "Every day something could go wrong. Weather, animals, accidents. We can't control it. Can only deal with it when it comes." "Aren't you scared?" "Terrified." She said it honestly. "Every day. But being scared doesn't change anything. Doesn't make the work go away or the winter less cold. So I do what needs doing anyway." Ezekiel studied her face in the moonlight. "You're braver than me." "No, just stubborn." He laughed softly. Then hesitantly, he reached for her hand. It was the first time he'd initiated touch since their wedding night. Clara's breath caught. His palm was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold room. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For staying, for fighting, for being here." "Where else would I be?" "Philadelphia. Somewhere easier. Somewhere you wouldn't have to work like a mule and risk breaking bones and face down angry mobs." "Philadelphia didn't want me. Red Hollow didn't want me. But you did." Clara squeezed his hand. "That matters more than easy." They sat like that until the cold drove them back to bed. But that night, the space between them narrowed. Not gone, they still had miles to cross, but narrower. Christmas came quiet and strange. Sarah brought over a chicken for roasting. Ezekiel surprised Clara with a new dress. Simple brown calico, but it fit better than anything she owned. Clara gave him gloves she'd made from leather scraps, lined with rabbit fur Sarah had helped her prepare. It wasn't much, but it felt like family. January brought brutal cold that made December look mild. The kind of cold that froze breath in the air, that made metal stick to bare skin, that killed if you weren't careful. Ezekiel spent hours each day breaking ice on water troughs, checking for frostbite on cattle, keeping everything alive. Clara learned to bank the fire so it burned all night, learned to layer clothes until she looked twice her size, learned to read weather and cloud patterns and wind direction. And she learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. One February morning, she woke before Ezekiel. Rare, but it happened. She lay there listening to him breathe, watching pale light creep through the window. 6 months. She'd been here 6 months, half a year since she'd stepped off that train into mockery and whispers. Half a year since Ezekiel had offered his hand and changed everything. She thought about the woman who'd made that journey, desperate, ashamed, running from a life that had rejected her. That woman seemed like a stranger now. Clara Boone wasn't desperate, wasn't running. She was building something real with her own hands, her own sweat, her own stubborn refusal to quit. Ezekiel stirred, opened his eyes, found her watching him. "Morning." "Morning," Clara smiled. "We should talk." He tensed slightly. "About what?" "About us. About what we're doing here." "Clara." "I'm not unhappy," she said quickly. "That's not what this is. But we've been dancing around each other for months now, living like polite strangers who share a bed. And I think we could be more than that, if we wanted to be." Ezekiel sat up slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this marriage started as a transaction, practical arrangement, but it doesn't have to stay that way." Clara's heart hammered. "I care about you, about this life we're building, and I hope, you feel something similar." The silence stretched so long she thought she'd miscalculated badly. Then Ezekiel reached for her hand. "I'm not good with words," he said roughly. "Never have been. But yeah, I feel it. Have for a while now, just didn't know how to say it." "You don't have to say it. Just don't hide from it." He pulled her closer, awkward, tentative, like he'd forgotten how to touch someone gently. Clara went to him, fitting herself against his side. "This is enough," she whispered. "For now. This is enough." They stayed like that until morning light filled the room and duty called them to another day of work. But something fundamental had shifted. Some barrier had come down. That night, Ezekiel kissed her. Clumsy at first, they were both out of practice, both scared of doing it wrong. But it was real, honest. And when Clara kissed him back, she tasted possibility. They took their time after that. No rushing, no pressure, just slow exploration of what it meant to be partners in every sense. Some nights they talked until late, sharing stories from before. Other nights they simply held each other, taking comfort in presence and warmth. And gradually, carefully, they became lovers. Imperfect, uncertain, but genuine. March brought the first hints of thaw. Snow began to recede from the south-facing slopes. Creek ice broke up with sounds like gunshots. And Clara discovered she was pregnant. She knew before she told anyone. Her body felt different, tender, strange, irrevocably changed. She waited a week, making sure, before she said anything. Sarah figured it out first. "You're carrying," the older woman said flatly one morning, watching Clara turn green at the smell of coffee. "How did you—" "I've got eyes. And you've got that look." Sarah's expression softened. "Does Ezekiel know?" "Not yet." "Tell him soon. Man deserves to know he's going to be a father." That night after supper, Clara found the words. "I'm pregnant." Ezekiel froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "You're sure?" "Pretty sure." He set down the cup carefully. "How do you feel about it?" Terrified, excited, sick to my stomach most mornings. Clara tried to read his expression. "How do you feel about it?" "Same. All of that." He stood, crossed to where she sat, knelt beside her chair. "A baby." "A baby." Clara touched his face. You're going to be a father. I don't know how to be a father. Good thing babies don't know how to be babies. We'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, deep and sure, like he was trying to say everything he didn't have words for. When they broke apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. We'll need to add on to the house, he said practically. Need a room for the baby, and better heating, and Ezekiel, we have months. It's March. Baby's not coming until October at earliest. Still, there's planning to do, preparations. He was already spiraling into lists, into control of something he could manage. Clara let him. She understood the need to make something concrete out of something terrifying. Over the next weeks, the news spread. Sarah told a few people in town, the ones who'd stood with them during the meeting. They told others. By April, most of Red Hollow knew that Ezekiel and Clara Boone were expecting. The response surprised Clara. Women she'd never spoken to stopped her at the general store to offer advice. The doctor rode out to check on her, refused payment. Someone left a cradle on their porch, old but sturdy, with a note that just said, "Congratulations." It wasn't universal acceptance. Some people still whispered, still judged, but the hostility had faded to something more like wary tolerance. Clara took it. Tolerance was enough. May brought green to the hills and chaos to the ranch. Calving season meant sleepless nights, difficult births, constant vigilance. Ezekiel hired 2 hands to help with the work. Clara watched from the house, frustrated she couldn't do more, but knowing her body had other work now. She felt the baby move for the first time in early June. Just a flutter, like something brushing against her from inside. She froze, hand going to her belly, waiting for it to happen again. There, stronger this time. Ezekiel! He came running from the barn, face panicked. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The baby moved. Feel this. She grabbed his hand, pressed it to her stomach. They waited. Nothing. Maybe it stopped. Then the baby kicked, hard enough that Ezekiel felt it. His face transformed. That's our child. That's our child. They stood there, his hand on her belly, both of them grinning like fools. Summer passed in a blur of preparation. Ezekiel built the addition to the house, a small room just big enough for a cradle and a chest of drawers. Sarah taught Clara about childbirth with blunt practicality that would have horrified Philadelphia ladies. But Clara found comforting. It'll hurt, Sarah said flatly, worse than anything you've felt. But millions of women have done it and survived. You will too. How can you be sure? Because you're too stubborn to die, and because I'll be there to make sure you don't. The baby grew. Clara's body expanded in ways that fascinated and horrified her. Her back ached, her feet swelled. She couldn't sleep comfortably no matter what position she tried. But beneath the discomfort was something else. Wonder. This small life forming inside her, made from her and Ezekiel, growing toward its own existence. By September, she was enormous and miserable and desperately ready to be done. Any day now, the doctor said during his last visit. Baby's dropped into position. Could be tomorrow, could be next week. No way to know. It was neither. October 5th, Clara woke just after midnight to wetness between her legs and a pain that made her gasp. Ezekiel. He was awake instantly. Is it time? I think so. He lit the lamp with shaking hands. I'll get Sarah. Don't leave. But he was already running. The next hours blurred into pain unlike anything Clara had imagined. She'd thought breaking her leg was bad. This was worse. This was her body tearing itself apart to make way for new life. Sarah arrived and took control with calm efficiency. Breathe, walk if you can. Don't push until I say. Clara tried to follow instructions, tried to be brave, but the pain reduced her to animal sounds and desperate gripping of whatever was nearest. Ezekiel stayed despite Sarah ordering him out, held Clara's hand while she screamed. Let her curse him for doing this to her. Stayed. Dawnlight was creeping through the window when Sarah finally said, All right, now you can push. Clara pushed. Nothing. Again. She pushed until she thought she'd die from it. I can see the head. 1 more. 1 more turned into 5 more. 10. Clara lost count, lost everything except the need to get this baby out, to be done, to survive. Then suddenly, release. A sound unlike anything else. High and outraged. A baby crying. It's a girl, Sarah announced. Claire collapsed back against the pillows, shaking and weeping and laughing all at once. Sarah cleaned the baby, wrapped her in a blanket, placed her in Claire's arms. Small, red, furious at the world. Perfect. She's beautiful, Ezekiel whispered. She wasn't really. All babies were kind of ugly at birth, but she was theirs. What should we name her? Clara asked. They discussed names but never decided. Now, looking at this tiny scowling face, Clara knew. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. Ezekiel touched one finger to the baby's tiny fist. She grabbed it, grip surprisingly strong. Hope Boone, he said softly. Welcome to Montana. The first weeks with a newborn were chaos. Hope cried constantly. She ate and cried and slept and cried some more. Clara fed her until her breasts ached, rocked her until her arms trembled, existed in a fog of exhaustion that made those first days on the ranch seem easy. But she loved it. Loved this squirming, demanding creature who turned her life inside out. Ezekiel was awkward with Hope at first, terrified of holding her wrong, of breaking something. But he learned to change her, to soothe her, to walk the floor at 2 a.m. singing off-key songs while Clara got a few hours of desperately needed sleep. They became a family in those exhausted weeks. Truly a family bound by more than marriage papers or practical arrangement. Sarah helped when she could, but mostly it was just the two of them figuring it out as they went. We're terrible at this, Clara said one particularly brutal night when Hope had been crying for 3 hours straight. We're new at this, Ezekiel corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Has to be. Otherwise everyone would be terrible forever. Eventually Hope settled into something resembling a schedule. She still cried plenty, but now there was pattern to it, predictability. Clara began to feel almost human again. Winter came early that year. By November, snow was falling in earnest. But this time Clara wasn't afraid of it. She'd survived one Montana winter. She could survive another. On Christmas morning, she woke to find Ezekiel already up, holding Hope by the window and pointing out snow falling in the early light. First Christmas, he murmured to the baby. Gotta see the snow. Clara watched them, her husband and her daughter, silhouetted against winter white, and felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. Not perfect. Not easy. But whole. She'd come to Montana desperate and ashamed, looking for any escape from a life that had rejected her. She'd found mockery, scandal, pain, fear. She'd broken bones and faced down hostile crowds and learned that survival required more strength than she'd known she possessed. But she'd also found partnership, love, purpose. She'd found home. Merry Christmas, she said softly. Ezekiel turned, smiled. Merry Christmas. Hope chose that moment to grab his beard and yank. He yelped. Clara laughed. Outside, snow continued to fall on the ranch they'd fought for. Inside, a fire burned warm while a baby fussed and her parents fumbled their way through another day. It wasn't what Clara had imagined for herself. It was better. Spring came late that year, winter holding on with teeth that wouldn't let go. But when it finally broke in mid-April, the transformation was violent and beautiful. Snow melting so fast the creek swelled beyond its banks, wildflowers exploding across hillsides in riots of color that made Clara's chest ache. Hope was 6 months old and already showing the stubborn streak she'd inherited from both parents. She refused to sleep when she was supposed to, refused to eat anything but what she wanted, and had recently discovered she could make Brutus come running by shrieking at the top of her lungs. She's going to be trouble, Sarah observed one morning, watching Hope grab fistfuls of the dog's fur while he endured it with patient resignation. She already is trouble, Clara said, but her voice was full of affection. Ezekiel came in from the barn, face thoughtful. Got news from town. Clara's hand stilled in the bread dough she was kneading. News from town was rarely good. What kind of news? The Hendersons are selling out, moving back to Missouri. Said they can't take another winter. He poured himself coffee. They're offering their land at a good price, adjacent to our north border, the section we sold them. Clara processed this. You want to buy it back. And then some. They've got another 40 acres beyond what we sold. Water rights to the upper creek. Good grazing. He sat at the table. But it would take most of our savings. Everything we made from selling that land in the first place, plus the profit from last year's cattle sale. Risky. Everything out here is risky. Clara wiped flour from her hands and sat across from him. Hope was still tormenting Brutus, babbling nonsense syllables that she seemed to think were words. What does your gut tell you? Ezekiel was quiet for a moment. That we should do it. That land gives us room to expand the herd. Better water access. It makes us more viable long term. Then we do it. Just like that? Just like that. Clara reached for his hand. We're partners, remember? I trust your judgment. Something crossed his face. Gratitude, maybe? Or surprise that she'd have such faith. Even after all these months, he sometimes looked at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. I'll ride to town tomorrow. Make the offer. The deal went through within a week. The Hendersons seemed almost relieved to unload the property, like they couldn't leave Montana fast enough. Clara understood the feeling, even if she didn't share it anymore. This place could break you if you weren't careful, if you didn't have something to hold on to. But she had something, someone, a whole family built from scratch and stubbornness. May brought the first real test of their expanded operation. With more land came more responsibility, more cattle, more work than two people and occasional hired hands could manage alone. We need permanent help, Ezekiel said, after a particularly brutal week where he'd barely slept. Can't keep running on empty. They hired two men, brothers named Tom and James Crawford, who'd worked ranches in Wyoming and knew their business. Young, competent, willing to work for fair wages and a place to sleep. They moved into the bunkhouse Ezekiel had built years ago but never needed until now. The ranch felt different with other people around, louder, busier. But in a good way, like a body finally getting all its parts working together. Clara took on more of the business side, keeping books, managing supplies, negotiating with buyers when cattle went to market. She had a head for numbers and a growing reputation for being shrewd but fair. People who'd once mocked her now treated her with something approaching respect. It felt like victory, small but real. June brought visitors. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the buggy coming up the road. Fancy thing, too nice for Red Hollow's rutted paths. Her stomach clenched. Fancy meant strangers, and strangers meant complications. Ezekiel, she called toward the barn. He emerged, saw the buggy, and his expression went carefully neutral. The buggy pulled to a stop, and a woman stepped down. Older, maybe 60, dressed in traveling clothes that had probably been expensive once but were now faded from hard use. Behind her, a man who must be her husband, graying, weathered, kind eyes. The woman's gaze swept the ranch, taking inventory, then landed on Clara. You must be Clara Boone. I am. Can I help you? I'm Margaret Carson. This is my husband, Henry. She paused, like the name should mean something. When Clara's face showed only polite confusion, the woman's shoulders dropped slightly. We're Robert Carson's parents. The name hit like a fist. Robert Carson, the man back in Philadelphia who'd courted Clara as a joke, who'd made her believe someone might actually want her before admitting it was all a bet. What are you doing here? Clara's voice came out harder than she'd intended. Ezekiel had arrived at her side, reading the tension. Problem? No problem, Henry Carson said quickly. We wanted to speak with Mrs. Boone, if she's willing. Clara wanted to send them away, wanted nothing to do with any reminder of that humiliation, but curiosity won out. Come inside. She settled them at the kitchen table. Made coffee because that's what you did, even for people you didn't want in your house. Hope was napping, thank goodness. One less complication. Margaret Carson wrapped her hands around the coffee cup like she needed the warmth despite the June heat. I won't waste your time with pleasantries, she began. We came because we owe you an apology. Clara had not expected that. We didn't know, Margaret continued, about what Robert did, about the bet, the cruelty of it. We thought he'd courted you properly, that you'd simply chosen to go west for your own reasons. Her voice cracked. Then we found letters. Things he'd written to his friends, bragging about it, about how he'd fooled the fat girl, made her think someone could want her. The old shame tried to surface. Clara pushed it down. Why are you telling me this? Because parents bear responsibility for the children they raise. We raised a son who thought cruelty was sport. Margaret's eyes were wet. And we wanted you to know that we're sorry. that we were wrong about you, about everything. You didn't even know me. No. But we knew Robert, knew the kind of man he was, even if we didn't want to admit it. She looked at Clara square. We heard about what you did here, how you stood up to an entire town, built a life from nothing, became someone worth knowing. How did you hear about that? Robert told us. He still has friends back east who write to him about frontier news. When your name came up, when he realized you'd married, had faced down scandal and won, he was furious. Margaret's smile was bitter. Because you were supposed to stay defeated, stay the girl he could mock. But you didn't. Ezekiel's hand found Clara's under the table. She squeezed it. I'm sorry you came all this way, Clara said carefully. But I don't need your apology. Don't want it, really. What your son did hurt, but it also freed me. Sent me here. Gave me this. She gestured around the kitchen. I wouldn't trade this life for anything, including your son's regret. Margaret nodded slowly. You're kinder than I'd be in your place. Not kind, just unwasting energy on the past. The Carsons left an hour later. Clara watched their buggy disappear down the road, feeling strange. You all right? Ezekiel asked. Yeah? Actually, I am. Clara turned to him. I thought seeing them would make me feel small again, like that girl in Philadelphia who believed she was worthless. But I don't feel small. Good, because you're not. He pulled her close. You're the strongest person I know. Stronger than you? Especially stronger than me. I just work hard. You rebuilt yourself completely. Clara leaned into him, breathing in the familiar smell of horses and hay and home. We rebuilt each other, she said. That summer was the best they'd had. The herd grew, the ranch prospered. Hope learned to crawl and then to pull herself up on furniture, lurching around with the single-minded determination of someone who'd be walking by fall. Clara's legs still ached when weather changed, and she still walked with a slight limp, but it barely registered anymore. Just part of her. Like her hands or her voice. In August, Sarah made an announcement. I'm leaving. Clara looked up from churning butter, certain she'd misheard. What? Leaving, not immediately, but by September. Sarah kept her voice matter-of-fact. My sister back in Illinois is widowed, needs help with her farm. I'm going to go live with her. But you hate Illinois. You always said you'd die in Montana. I did say that. Changed my mind. Sarah's expression softened. You don't need me anymore, Clara. You know how to run this place. You're capable, and I'm tired. Want to spend my last years somewhere I don't have to fight winter 9 months out of 12. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, but it's time. Sarah reached across the table, squeezed Clara's hand. You came here broken and desperate. Now look at you. You don't need me propping you up. Still nothing. This is a good thing for both of us. They threw Sarah a farewell party in early September. Half the town showed up. The half that had stood with them anyway. There was food and music and too much whiskey. Sarah got genuinely drunk for the first time in Clara's memory and told bawdy stories that made everyone laugh. When the wagon came to take her to the train station, Clara hugged her so hard Sarah wheezed. Write to me, Clara demanded. When I have time. Make time. Bossy. But Sarah was smiling. Take care of them. Take care of yourself. Then she was gone, and the ranch felt emptier despite being fuller than it had ever been. Fall came in a rush of gold and red. The cattle were fat and healthy, the harvest from the garden more than they needed. Ezekiel sold off some of the herd at premium prices, bringing in enough money to see them through winter with plenty left over. We're doing it, he said one night, going over the books. Actually making this work. Did you doubt we would? Every day. He looked up, smiled. Still do sometimes, but less than before. Hope was walking now, tottering around on unsteady legs while Brutus followed like a worried nursemaid. She'd said her first word, da, which made Ezekiel grin like a fool for 3 days straight. Clara watched her daughter explore the world with fearless curiosity and thought about the future, about what kind of woman Hope would become, about the lessons she'd teach her, that you could be broken and remake yourself stronger, that kindness mattered, but so did standing your ground, that love was work, daily work, but worth every ounce of effort, that sometimes the life you didn't plan for turned out better than anything you could have imagined. October arrived, and with it, Hope's first birthday. Clara made a small cake, her first attempt at something fancy, and it showed. Lopsided, frosting uneven, but Hope didn't care. She smashed her fist into it and laughed while Clara tried to capture the moment in her memory forever. "Can't believe it's been a year," Ezekiel said, watching their daughter paint herself with frosting. "Feels like yesterday. Feels like forever ago." Clara wiped frosting off Hope's nose. Both at the same time. That night, after Hope was asleep, they sat on the porch watching stars emerge. The air had that particular crispness that promised winter wasn't far off. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come here?" Ezekiel asked. "Sometimes. Usually when I'm exhausted or frustrated or missing things like indoor plumbing." Clara smiled. "But then I look at what we've built and I can't imagine anything else. Even with everything that happened, the accident, the scandal, all of it, especially with all of that, the hard things made us who we are." She took his hand. "Made us real." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only came after you'd been through hell together, and came out the other side. Winter that year was milder than the last, still brutal by Eastern standards, but Clara had Montana standards now. She knew how to layer clothes, bank fires, read weather in the sky. She knew how to survive. More than survive. How to live. In January, news finally came about Victor. Sheriff Carson rode out personally to deliver it. Victor had been arrested in Denver for fraud, something about a mining scheme that collapsed when investors realized there was no mine. He was going to prison. "Thought you'd want to know," Carson said. Ezekiel took the news without visible reaction. "How long?" 5 years minimum. Could be more depending on how much money they can track. After the sheriff left, Clara waited for Ezekiel to say something. He stood by the window staring out at snow-covered fields. "You all right?" she finally asked. "He's my brother." Ezekiel's voice was rough. "I should feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Or vindication. But you don't?" "I just feel tired. Tired of the whole thing. Tired of Victor being Victor." He turned to face her. "Is that wrong?" "No. It's human." Clara moved to stand beside him. "He made his choices. Now he's living with them. That's not your burden to carry." Still nothing. You don't owe him your pain or your pity. You owe him nothing." Ezekiel pulled her into his arms. They stood like that until Hope started crying from the other room, demanding attention. Life went on. Cattle needed feeding. Fences needed mending. A daughter needed raising. The work never stopped, which meant there was no time to dwell on people who'd chosen different paths. By spring, Clara was pregnant again. She knew the signs this time, knew what was coming. The exhaustion, the sickness, the way her body would transform. But she also knew it would end with another life, another person to love. "Seems fitting," Sarah wrote in a letter from Illinois. "Ranch is growing. Family should grow too." The second pregnancy was harder than the first. Clara was older, more tired, chasing a toddler while trying to manage morning sickness that lasted all day. But she pushed through because that's what you did. You endured. In November, she gave birth to a son. Faster delivery than Hope, thank goodness, but just as intense. Sarah wasn't there this time, but Mrs. Henderson, who'd moved back to Red Hollow after her husband died, helped midwife the birth. They named him James, after Ezekiel's father, a strong name for what they hoped would be a strong boy. Hope was fascinated by her baby brother. She wanted to hold him constantly, pet him like he was one of the barn cats, share her food with him, even though he couldn't eat it yet. Gentle, Clara reminded her for the 100th time. Be gentle with baby James. Watching her children together, Clara felt something shift in her understanding of what family meant. It wasn't just blood or marriage or legal documents. It was choice, daily choice to show up, to care, to build something bigger than yourself. 2 years passed in a blur of work and growth and small triumphs. The ranch continued to prosper. They bought more land, hired more help, became one of the more successful operations in the territory. Clara's business sense and Ezekiel's ranching knowledge proved an unbeatable combination. People in Red Hollow who'd once whispered about them now asked their advice. Clara served on the church ladies' auxiliary, not because she was particularly religious, but because that's where decisions got made about town improvements. Ezekiel was elected to the Territorial Cattle Association Board. They'd become pillars of the community, which was absurd when Clara thought about how it started. The fat mail-order bride and the difficult rancher, now somehow respectable. Hope turned 4 and started showing interest in horses. Ezekiel began teaching her to ride on patient old Bertie, who'd survived long enough to serve a second generation. James was 2 and talking in complete sentences, most of them questions. Why? Became his favorite word, asked about everything from why the sky was blue to why chickens couldn't fly. And Clara, watching them grow, felt something she'd never expected to feel. Pride, not the sinful kind the preachers warned about, but honest pride in what they'd built, what they'd become. In May of 1888, almost 5 years after Clara first stepped off that train, Red Hollow held its spring fair. It was a small affair, local ranchers showing cattle, women's baking competitions, children's games. Nothing fancy. But it felt important, this gathering of people who'd learned to survive together. Clara entered one of her quilts in the handicraft competition. She'd been working on it all winter, a star pattern in blues and greens that reminded her of Montana sky and grass. She didn't expect to win, just wanted to participate. She won first prize. Standing there with a blue ribbon pinned to her entry while people congratulated her, Clara had a moment of profound dislocation. 5 years ago, these same people had laughed at her, called her names, judged her before she'd even opened her mouth. Now they shook her hand and admired her work. "You've come a long way," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. Clara almost laughed. So has this town. That night, at home with her family around the dinner table, Ezekiel, Hope, James, the Crawford brothers who'd become like extended family, Clara looked around and felt complete. Not perfect. They still struggled sometimes. Money was still tight some years. The work was still backbreaking. They still fought occasionally, still got on each other's nerves, still faced the daily challenges of trying to build a life in unforgiving territory. But they were real. Solid. "Here, Mama, tell the story," Hope demanded, fork waving for emphasis. "What story?" "How you and Papa met, and the mean brother, and the broken leg." Clara looked at Ezekiel, who shrugged. They'd started telling the children sanitized versions of their story, adventure tales where the scary parts were softened and the triumphant ending emphasized. "All right," Clara began. "Once there was a woman who came from very far away on a train. She told it simply. The arrival, the mockery, Ezekiel's defense, the work of learning the ranch, Victor's scheming, the accident, the town meeting where everything changed. The children listened raptly, even though they'd heard it before. "And then what happened?" James asked, even though he knew. "Then we won," Clara said. "We told the truth and people listened, and the mean brother went away and never came back." "Good," Hope declared. "Mean people should go away. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't." Clara smoothed Hope's hair. "But either way, you keep going, keep building, keep choosing to be better than they are." After dinner, after the children were in bed, Clara and Ezekiel sat on the porch in the gathering dark. "You think we did right by them?" Ezekiel asked. "Raising them here, in the middle of nowhere, where everything's hard? I think we're giving them something real, something to hold on to when life tries to break them." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "That's more than I had. More than I had, too." They watched fireflies drift across the yard, listened to the sound of cattle settling for the night, breathed in the smell of sage and pine and home. "No regrets?" Ezekiel asked. Clara thought about it, really thought about Philadelphia and the girl she'd been, about the train ride and the terror of the unknown, about broken bones and broken reputations and the 1,000 small deaths of pride that had brought her here. "None," she said finally. "Not a single one." Summer came again, as it always did. The cycle of seasons that marked time in a way calendars never could. Clara watched her children grow, watched her husband age into someone silver-touched but still strong, watched the ranch expand and thrive. In quiet moments, she sometimes thought about the woman who'd stepped off that train 5 years ago, that desperate, ashamed creature who'd believed she was worthless. That woman was gone, transformed by work and will and the simple act of refusing to quit. In her place was someone Clara barely recognized sometimes, someone capable, strong, worthy, someone who'd learned that the world's judgment didn't define you unless you let it. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That love was messy and complicated and required constant tending, but grew stronger for all that effort. That sometimes the hardest paths led to the best destinations. That you could start over no matter how old or broken or lost you felt. That home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built with your own scarred hands. On Clara's 30th birthday, Ezekiel surprised her with a gift. He'd commissioned a photograph from the traveling photographer who'd passed through town, a formal portrait of their family. They stood stiff and uncomfortable in their best clothes while the photographer fussed with his equipment. Hope tried not to fidget. James kept making faces. Ezekiel looked stern. Clara felt ridiculous. But when the photograph came back weeks later, she saw something different. She saw a family, real and solid and unmistakably together. She saw strength in the set of her own shoulders, confidence in her gaze. She saw the life she'd built reflected back at her in sepia tones. "Frame it," she told Ezekiel. "Put it somewhere we'll see it every day." He hung it in the main room above the fireplace, a reminder of what they'd become. Years continued to pass. Hope grew into a fierce young woman who could rope a steer as well as any of the hands. James developed his father's quiet competence and his mother's head for numbers. More children came. 2 more daughters who filled the house with noise and life. The ranch prospered. Red Hollow grew from a dusty frontier town into something approaching civilization. The territory inched towards statehood. And through it all, Clara and Ezekiel endured. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. They lost cattle to disease one year, a barn burned down. Money got tight. They fought sometimes, harsh words in the heat of stress and exhaustion. But they showed up. Every day they chose each other, chose this life. And that choice, repeated daily, became something unbreakable. When Clara was 50, Sarah died in Illinois. The letter came from Sarah's sister, brief and to the point. She went peacefully in her sleep, wanted you to know she was proud of you. Clara wept for the woman who'd taught her to survive, who'd stood with her when no one else would, who'd seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself. "Should we go to the funeral?" Ezekiel asked. "No, Sarah wouldn't have wanted the fuss." Clara wiped her eyes. "But we'll plant a tree, something that'll last." They planted an apple tree on the south side of the house, where it would get full sun. Every spring when it bloomed, Clara thought of Sarah and smiled. Time moved differently as Clara aged, faster somehow, days blurring together while years felt distinct. She watched her children marry, watched grandchildren arrive, watched the world change in ways she couldn't have imagined that day she stepped off the train. Ezekiel's hair went fully silver, his back bent from years of hard work, but his eyes still held that same steady strength that had drawn her from the beginning. They celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. 30 years, Clara mused. Never thought we'd make it this long. Why not? Because it started as a transaction, because neither of us knew what we were doing, because everything was stacked against us. And yet, Clara took his weathered hand in hers. "We're still here." "Still here," he echoed. "Still choosing this. Still choosing you. Even though I'm old and fat and limp?" "Especially because of all that. It means you survived. We survived." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid warmth that had anchored her through storms she couldn't have weathered alone. "What do you think people will remember?" she asked. "About us, I mean, after we're gone." Ezekiel was quiet for a long moment. "I think they'll remember we didn't quit, that we faced down everything thrown at us and kept going. That's not much of a legacy." "It's everything. It's the only thing that matters." He squeezed her hand. "We built something real, raised good people, turned broken pieces into something whole. That's more than most can say." Clara thought about this, about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, about the journey between those two people, painful and terrifying, and absolutely worth it. "I'd do it all again," she said finally. "Every hard part, every moment I thought would break me, I'd do it all again to end up here." "So would I." They sat in the dark, holding hands, two old people who'd learned that love wasn't fireworks and poetry. It was showing up. It was choosing, again and again, to build something together. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. When Clara Boone died at 73, Surrounded by children and grandchildren in the house she'd made a home, her last thought was of that first day, standing on the platform while a town laughed at her, Ezekiel stepping forward with his hand outstretched, that single moment of kindness that had changed everything. She'd taken that hand and built a life from it, built a family, built herself. And in the end, that was the victory no one could take away. Not the people who'd mocked her, not the brother who'd schemed against them, not time or hardship or any of the 1,000 cruelties the world had thrown her way. She'd survived. She'd thrived. She'd become exactly who she was meant to be. And that, Clara thought as her eyes closed for the last time, was the best revenge of all. Her funeral was attended by half the territory. People came from 3 counties away to pay respects to the woman who'd arrived broken and left strong, who'd stood up when it mattered, who'd shown them all what courage actually looked like. Ezekiel stood by her grave with their children beside him, reading from a letter she'd written years ago, instructions for after she was gone. Don't mourn too long, he read, voice steady despite tears on his cheeks. I lived exactly the life I wanted. I loved and was loved. I built something that will outlast me. That's more than enough for anyone. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, where she could see the house and the barn and the mountains beyond, where the wind would always find her. And on her headstone, they carved words that told the whole story in 6 simple lines. Clara Boone, 1859 to 1932. She came broken. She left whole. She never quit. She won. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the judgment of strangers or the cruelty of those who couldn't see past surfaces. Not the accidents or scandals or storms weathered, just the simple truth that she'd taken a life that seemed hopeless and made it magnificent through sheer force of will. That she'd proven every single day for 50 years that people could change, that redemption was real, that courage existed in the decision to keep going when quitting would be easier, that love, real love, the kind built on partnership and respect and daily choice, could transform everything. Years after Clara's death, her great-grandchildren would visit that grave and ask about her, and their parents would tell them stories of the woman who'd arrived on a train to mockery and built an empire through stubbornness and strength. They'd tell them she was brave when brave wasn't easy, that she stood up when standing up meant standing alone, that she turned every obstacle into opportunity. And those children would grow up knowing that they came from strength. That weakness was just another word for potential waiting to be realized. That the world's judgment meant nothing compared to what you knew yourself to be. That sometimes the best stories started with the worst beginnings. That sometimes the broken pieces, reassembled with care and determination, created something more beautiful than anything that had never been shattered. That sometimes, just sometimes, the woman everyone underestimated became the one they'd never forget. And on quiet evenings in Red Hollow, when the wind came down from the mountains carrying the scent of sage and pine, people swore they could still feel her presence. Still sense that stubborn, magnificent strength that had transformed not just one woman's life, but an entire community's understanding of what it meant to be worthy. Clara Boone, mail order bride, rancher's wife, mother, grandmother, fighter, survivor, victor. She'd come to Montana desperate and ashamed, looking for any escape. She'd found herself instead. And in finding herself, she'd shown everyone else what real strength looked like. Not perfect, not smooth, not easy, but real. Human. Flawed, magnificent, exactly as it should be.